has prepared some materials, going to walk us through our rules and procedure, right? Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, so we figured, what's the best way to start this year off? Let's do a refresher on our rules of procedure. These were completely overhauled in 2018, but they have been reviewed yearly by this board, and they were last reviewed in February 2022. So we're going to talk through them, but this is an opportunity to comment on any changes you might have, any questions you might have. These are your rules. This is not statutory. This is a fluid document that you can change. So we'll go through that. There are some references to statutes, and obviously we can't change those parts, but, overall, this is your document. So I have a copy for everyone that you can keep close to you, keep by your bedside table.
I do have a hard time sleeping, so that'll help. No, Randall will not be joining us tonight, as well as Lynn.
Jill's right behind you.
Oh, sorry. Here you go. Thank you. Don't worry, guys. I got some copies.
Thank you,
for
Drew.
Here you go, Drew. So the rules start off with setting forth your regular meetings. When we meet, when we do our work sessions, and I think that's pretty standard language. 7 o'clock we start our work sessions, 7:30 we start our meetings. We meet the second Tuesday of every month unless otherwise noted. So,
I will note that
Yeah.
the workshops are designed because as members of a board, we do have a requirement by, it's the county, I believe, for learning.
Yes, that's correct. So it's actually under general city law, requires that you do 4 hours of training every year. The city can change that requirement, but it has not, so 4 hours is the time period. So that's why we do these work sessions. They count towards those training hours, and Amanda keeps track, so she knows how many trainings, how many hours each of you have. But that does not exclude you from attending other training programs. If Dutchess County does a session, it doesn't even have to be exactly about planning boards. It could be just planning issues or a planning discussion or something, about zoning. That can also count towards your training. So if you ever on your own attend one of these sessions, feel free to let us know and we can put it towards your hours. If you're not sure if it could count, you can ask Jen or myself and we can, tell you. We can talk to the mayor, we can talk to Chris, the city administrator. And so you're not limited to just the training here. In fact, we encourage you to seek training elsewhere if you're able to. And there's a lot of good programs held everywhere, especially now post-COVID. A lot of things are virtual. So
The Pace Land Use Law Center offers some really great programs.
yeah, they do an annual meeting. I think they just had theirs in December, but every December they do a big program that counts towards training hours. And then kind of dispersed throughout the year, they might do a couple sessions here and there. And we'll try and keep you more appraised of those. We try and send emails when we get that information, but we can pay more attention to that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So that brings us to membership expectations. So obviously you're expected to do your 4 hours of training, just like we talked about. You're, required to attend these meetings. If you have to be absent, please let us know, let the chairman know, so we can make sure that we have a quorum.
The group here is usually very good about enough notice. We've had very few, but some where we were worried about whether we'd make a quorum. Usually Randall shows up at the very last minute. So, but yeah, it's always good to know well in advance if you. And again, everybody here is very good about that.
Yeah,
if you
and
feel you're not able to attend.
And it's important because in order to take any action, you have to have a quorum present in person. So a quorum of this board would be 5. You have to have at least 5, at least 4 members of the 7-member board to take any action. So if we don't have a quorum, you can't do anything. Otherwise, you'd be in violation of the open meetings law.
And then when we are only just a quorum, let's talk a little bit about how we want to make sure that applicants who might see action from us on their applications should be aware of the fact that there is a chance with only just 4 of us that they don't have the benefit of a full board and a full vote.
Yeah, so just to add to that point, that's great, John, that you brought that up. In order to approve any resolution, that you must have at least 4 yes votes. And it's votes of the entire board. So even though there's 4 members, it's not a majority of the 4, right? It's not 3 out of the 4. It's always at least 4. Otherwise, the action does not move forward. That's why it's so critical that, everyone's here and that you let the applicants know if you're only going to have 4 or 5 members, because they might want to hold over to the next meeting when they'll have the opportunity to present to the entire board in case they might get some no votes. So, and that's, generally a courtesy to let them know so that they can make that decision early on. Part of your other jobs are obviously to make sure that you're familiar with the materials. It's not great if you show up to a meeting and you haven't looked at the application. It's really hard to render a responsible decision if you haven't looked at anything, or to ask applicable questions. So always make sure that you're aware of what's on the agenda, what the materials are, what has been submitted. We talked about the training. Also, when you come on board, make sure you're familiar with the code, the relevant provisions of the city code, which are always available online. I think at this point nobody is brand new to the board except for David, but I think you have a good idea of what you need to know, what chapters are most relevant to your review requirements. And I know David from the ZBA. He knows his chapters.
We'll make formal introductions
Yeah.
when we start the meeting. But yes, we're very glad for David joining us.
Okay, so then we have the chairperson responsibilities. Obviously, they're going to preside over the meetings. They're responsible for signing your final plats, your site plans and permit approvals. Any other instruments that have to be signed by the planning board are going to be signed by the chairman. And there might be other duties from time to time that the chairman has to be responsible for. He does, in addition to these meetings, he has to attend pre-conference calls where we talk about the applications and any other special calls. So the chairperson does more than just be here, but kind of has to be prepared to lead these meetings and lead the discussion on the application. So there's more that comes with that. So thank you, John, for being chair. That's great. All right, so let's talk about some additional guidelines for planning board members. You should be recognized by the presiding officer before speaking and or making a motion. A member shall address the chair and shall wait to be recognized. These rules, they might sound silly, but they help create an orderly meeting. Nothing's worse than a disorderly meeting. I mean, it's not efficient, it's confusing, and it doesn't create a clean record. So these rules really help the efficiency of a meeting and help ensure that we are going to document everything that is happening appropriately, and we'll have those records forever. Also makes it easier for Amanda to take notes as well and then produce those notes in the minutes. So, conflict of interest. It's important that you're aware of whether or not you have a conflict of interest with an application. A member is prevented from participating in a matter if there's a conflict of interest, and you have to immediately notify, the chair, the planning board secretary, and Jennifer Gray. That even if you're not sure, if you think that there's a conflict, if you have some sort of relationship with the applicant, and you're like, ooh, does that create a conflict? Reach out to Jennifer or myself, and we can talk you through about whether or not an actual conflict exists. Because if you participate on an application where a conflict does exist, then you could be jeopardizing that decision and make it vulnerable to challenge. So it's very important, and sometimes it's just a matter of disclosing your relationship and saying that I can review this application impartially and render a fair decision. You don't necessarily have to recuse yourself, so there's 3 options at the end of the day. 1, no conflict at all. You don't have to say anything. 2, you have a relationship. You might want to disclose that relationship and confirm that you can look at it impartially. Or 3, you have to recuse yourself if there is actually a conflict. And that would require you to step away from the table and, to actually step out of the room would be ideal, or sit in the back. So, it's just important to be aware of those requirements and never hesitate to talk to Jennifer or myself. There's no judgment on the conflict, it just happens. This is a small city. Non-disclosure of confidential information. So this is critical. There is an exchange of information, sometimes attorney-client privilege communications. You should not release anything to the public. These are confidential pieces that remain with the planning board. That's critical for FOIL reasons. Once you release it to the public, then that information can then be released to everybody. It loses its protections. So make sure that you're using your City of Beacon email accounts, and make sure that you're not releasing any information. If you receive, this is kind of not exactly with confidential information, but if you receive an email related to a planning board matter and that email goes to your personal account, we recommend forwarding it to your City of Beacon email account and responding from your Beacon email account. That way, because if there's a FOIL request, that would put your personal email account subject to review. And you don't want to do that. That's your personal account. So make sure that your planning board issues are always with your City of Beacon email account, and that you're not releasing any private or confidential information. Any memos that come out, if they're coming from our office, they'll say, typically say privileged and confidential. If you're not sure, you should always ask. Anything that's posted on the website, obviously that's public, but don't forward any emails, don't forward any memos. Otherwise, you'll ruin confidentiality, which could create additional disclosures in the future. So be very careful with confidential information. All right, meeting. So I mentioned the open meetings law. The planning board is a public body. You are subject to the provisions of the open meetings law. That's Article 7 of the Public Officers Law. This requires meeting minutes to be taken. It requires that you have a quorum to take any action. It requires that the quorum be present in person. You could attend virtually. I don't think the planning board typically does that nowadays, right?
No.
Virtual attendance?
No.
Right, so your quorum has to be in person, and all your meetings are open to the public except for executive sessions. And executive session are limited reasons that you can step away from the public and talk about either personal information or attorney-client advice, things of that nature.
Another important component to this is members discussing aspects of applications outside of the meeting setting. Highly discouraged.
Highly discouraged.
Right. We can certainly talk with public about the aspects of our procedure, what the planning board does,
Yes.
how it relates to, planning in general, but not specifics of active applications as they're being reviewed by us individually with either others or the applicant themselves.
Right, that would be a violation of the open meetings law. In fact, anytime a majority of the board is together, and that might be, it's, again, small city, you might be all at the same restaurant or go to the same Christmas party. That's okay. Do not talk about city business, specifically planning board matters. That would be a violation of the open meetings law. And every meeting has to be properly noticed and open to the public. So again, keep discussions to, this room during meeting time. That also goes for email correspondence. You can't start a discussion exchange via email. That's also a violation of the open meetings law. So if you have a question and you reply all asking the question and Kevin has an answer, Kevin should not be replying all. That needs to be saved for an open meetings discussion. So refrain from correspondence via email as a group. Again, though, that's not to say do never hesitate to email any of anyone in our office or any of the consultants. That's why we're here for you. Cool. So the planning board holds public hearings in addition to those. So you can hold public hearings in addition to those required by law, right? Site plan requires public hearings. Special use permit requires public hearings. Our seeker public hearings are not required by law, but the planning board has a tradition of holding secret public hearings if they feel it's appropriate. That's like an extra public hearing, and you can do that under your rules. Site visits can also be conducted by the planning board as a group or separately by individuals. The determination of whether a group site visit will be performed should be made at a regularly scheduled planning board meeting. So again, it should not happen via email where we're all like, okay, cool, everybody let's go on Wednesday at 9 o'clock. That decision should be made in the public meeting. Site visits are limited to touring and obtaining factual information pertaining to the site and application without substantive discussion. So you don't, you know how we talked about anytime a majority gets together and you start talking about an application, you're violating the open meetings law. But there is an exception for site visits where you're not having substantive discussions and you're talking about your observations. That's okay. And those do not need to be noticed, and the public's not allowed to participate in those. What's essential, though, is that when you come back here, you reiterate your observations and talk about what you saw, and then have the substantive discussion. So site visits are okay. Again, the meeting should be noted during a public meeting, and no substantive discussion should happen while you're on site. So, you know, and we get a lot of questions about that as well. Proceedings. So the chair presides over all the meetings, like we said, and in the chair's absence, the acting chair shall preside at the meetings. Do we know who the acting chair is?
Randall.
Randall. Okay, good to know. In the event the mayor has failed to appoint the acting chair or where such member is absent from the chair, the meeting shall select another board member. So if you couldn't attend and Randall couldn't attend,
Yeah.
then you can designate someone
Yeah.
else.
At this point, we don't have a second, so we'll sort of take that up. It may be a good idea.
Yeah.
Yep.
Let's see, so under New York State law, noticing a public hearing is not required after the initial public hearing is held and continued at a specified date. So we all know that prior to a public hearing, you have to do your mailings and you have to post your sign. Your additional notice is not required once that public hearing happens. You can adjourn it. We recommend always adjourning it to a date certain. That way, if someone's interested in the application, they'll know that they can attend, you know, the next meeting or whenever it may be.
There have been instances, in fact, one recently, where we've noticed public hearing, that public hearing hasn't taken place. A couple of months have gone by, we've re-noticed for that reason.
Right, absolutely, because you just want to be fair to the public, and the purpose of notice is to make sure they know when their opportunity is going to happen for them to speak on the application. So if a long time has gone past or it's not clear when that public hearing was going to take place, then re-noticing would be appropriate in that case. And always the signage is continuously updated, so.
And we got bigger and better signs a year ago, so.
Yeah. We're moving up in the world.
Yeah.
So before the public comment, a formal presentation by the applicant or their representative should take place. That's going to allow them to introduce the application or to provide updates both for this board and then for the public so they know, you know, what's going on. The chair should identify all correspondence pertaining to the application previously received from the general public and enter such correspondence in the record. Again, it's important to enter it into the record because that's what the history of this matter. And if it ever goes to an Article 78 or any other types of challenges or questions, the record is essential to the board's determination. You should not make any conclusions that aren't supported by what's in the record. So,
Usually written submissions go directly to the city. Those are then automatically entered into the record, right? Yep.
oh, I'm so sorry. I also forgot to scroll. My apologies. Anyone in the public, these rules are posted on the planning board page. So while I failed to scroll, they are available for all to see. And I went too far. But yes, if you receive any comments, though, you should always forward them to Amanda so
Sure.
that they do get in the record,
Yeah.
just in case they weren't sent to her.
Yeah, and there are some instances, most of this is now happening electronically, but some instances where we'll receive written correspondence at the meeting. So the procedure of recognizing it, entering it, and sharing it with the clerk is important.
Exactly. Where were we? So no action shall be taken upon an application that is subject to a public hearing until such time as the public hearing has been closed. I think everybody at this point knows you can't approve a project until the public hearing is done, or until really the first step, seeker complete, public hearing, then you can make a decision. So, it's just important to be aware of the steps. Then we have some motions. I'll move past that. I think everybody's got that. Voting. A majority of the whole membership of the planning board, including vacancies, abstentions, and any members disqualified, shall constitute a quorum. Therefore, a quorum of the 7-member board is 4 members. We talked about that a bunch. A quorum shall be necessary to take any formal action and to exercise any power. No member shall withdraw from a meeting of the planning board without permission from the chair. The chair of the planning board shall have the right to act on matters before the board as other members, including the right to make and second motions. The ayes and nays of all board member votes shall be recorded in the minutes. Disqualification. Each member of the planning board shall vote on all questions before the board unless required to abstain in accordance with any applicable law, regulation, or other valid reason. For example, our conflict of interest reason. I mean, that would be the main reason you might step away. Or abstain if you feel uncomfortable rendering a vote after everything you've heard and don't want to say aye or nay. A membership abstaining shall cite the reason for their abstention. Members shall be automatically disqualified based upon a business interest or financial interest like we talked about before.
Just real quick, on abstentions, you mentioned the member abstaining shall cite the reason. I feel it's always good practice to, when voting nay, to share your reasons for that as well for the record.
No, that's a fair request. So conduct of speakers. I know that sometimes the planning board meetings have a lot of public hearings on your agendas and they can go very late. And so it's important, that we have effective, efficient meetings. So that's making sure that the board is acting accordingly and also understanding how speakers are requested to conduct themselves. So all persons speaking before the planning board are required to conform to the following standards of conduct. And I'll make sure I get to this page. Here we go. Speakers must step up to the podium to address the planning board. Before addressing the planning board, a speaker must give their name, address, and organization for the record. Speakers shall address all members of the planning board and shall avoid speaking at any one member directly or to the applicant or to the general public presentation at the meeting. It's not meant to be a back and forth discussion. The speakers are meant to come to the podium and express their questions, their concerns, their comments, and then sit back down and the board can discuss. You can direct the applicant to answer, but they would be answering to you, not facing any member of the public. It's not a Q&A, it's not a fluid discussion.
Yeah, there are many times when public share their observations, comments, but also have questions, and we usually like to gather those questions.
Right.
And, give the applicant the benefit of responding to them if they so desire. So.
And typically the applicant's representatives are going to be sitting in the audience,
exactly,
taking notes, writing them down, and then they can be invited back up to answer all the questions
right
at once. A speaker's individual time to speak at a public hearing may not exceed 5 minutes. The chair may reduce such time to no less than 3 minutes if the chair or the planning board determines that an additional time limitation is appropriate due to the number of items on the agenda or the number of people present who wish to speak. Speakers shall observe commonly accepted rules of courtesy, decorum, dignity, and good taste. Any statements, comments, or remarks made by a speaker, 1, shall not concern the motives of a member of the planning board, and 2, shall not constitute a personal and or political attack or criticism of any member of the planning board, any officer of the city, any consultant of the city, any employee of the city, or any other member of the public. The audience shall be respectful of all speakers and shall refrain from comments and gestures such as clapping, cheering, booing. I got snapping once.
Snapping?
Yeah.
That's new.
That's like a quieter alternative, but still not okay. Private discussions, cell phone use, and otherwise interfering with the meeting is not permitted. Again, this is we're conducting public business. We want to conduct it efficiently and openly, so we need everyone to act appropriately. Any speaker who fails to conform their conduct to the rules provided herein shall be directed by the chair to cease speaking and yield the floor. The applicant and the applicant's representative shall not be bound to the time limit set forth herein, but shall be allowed to speak for such time as permitted at the sole discretion of the chair. The chair shall make all speakers aware of these guidelines for public comment. Copies of the guidelines for public comment shall be made available to the audience at the meeting, along with a copy of the agenda. These documents and the agenda and all the application materials are all posted online and easily accessible. That word was very difficult for me. Interested parties or their representatives not in attendance may address the planning board by written submission prior to the close of the public hearing. Debate or discussion between audience members and the speaker having the floor shall not be permitted. And then debate or discussion with the speaker on part of a member of the planning board, city attorney, city consultant, a guest, or any other city employee in the audience who has information pertinent to the discussion shall not be permitted except in the chair's discretion. The planning board may advise and make recommendations to the city council relating to any subject matter over which the planning board has jurisdiction, including proposed legislation. This comes up a lot if the city council is contemplating, a zoning change or trying to think of one, scenic overlay district or designating scenic sites, or I think we did historic properties. You are free to, as a group, discuss this legislative action or discuss changes that you might think might be appropriate and make recommendations to the city council. But again, that's a public discussion. You can add it as a miscellaneous item to your agenda, and you're free to have those discussions. You're also allowed to make investigations, maps, reports, and recommendations pertaining to planning and development issues, including involving the comprehensive plan, use of municipal land, capital budgets, or other matters related to those areas. Planning board members shall refrain from initiating or engaging in ex parte communication concerning any application or matter pending or likely to be pending before the board with applicants and their representatives, potential applicants, and members of the public. I think it's important to note that it's current applications, but it's also the ones that you are aware are coming. Whether the city council mentioned that they're coming before you, or it's kind of common knowledge that a developer has bought a property and they'll be coming. Those conversations should also not take place. You're members of the planning board. You're here to have those discussions.
Could you just elaborate what the Latin means?
Ex parte. It means communications outside the planning board. You shouldn't be talking to your City of Beacon neighbor and giving them the lowdown of what's going on these applications. I think that also goes back to violating the confidentiality that we have, or the attorney-client privilege of some of the communications before they might be public. Or answering, your neighbor's question. You say, come to the planning board. We'll talk about it there. Or I'll make a note of your question and I'll talk about it in public. So that ex parte means outside of the planning board. Recordings of proceedings. Again, it's required under the open meetings law that you have your meeting minutes. Every meeting of the planning board is recorded. It's posted on the website, so we're all, famous. If anybody wants to see those videos, they are up from years back. And then, let's see, we have the official record of the meetings are going to be the minutes prepared by the planning board secretary, but we also have, like I said, again, these recordings that are kept, and these can be part of the official record as well. The meeting recordings are retained as part of the city's retention schedule, so they're retained for several years. I believe it's 5 years. So they're not going anywhere anytime soon. And if it's a big project, then they're actually required to be maintained indefinitely. If they're believed to have some historical significance or might come up, and that can be designated at the discretion of the city how long it'll be retained for. And those are your rules. I know we went through them kind of fast.
You're right on time, Drew.
I tried, John. If you go back and you're reading these again and you have any questions, again, always feel free to email myself or Jen If you have any revisions, make sure you bring them back next month, and you can, make a suggestion to amend the rules, and you can amend these at any time throughout the year. So keep this close. It's
This is great.
online, but you can, I should have laminated or something, so something permanent.
We all have laminated copies already
Yeah.
under our pillows. Yeah, this is great. A really great way to start the new year. So thank you, Drew.
Oh, you're very welcome. My pleasure.
And I have to say, for the most part, these rules of procedure have been working very well for us. But again, if there's any thoughts or ideas that the board might have and want to bring, let's talk about them next month. And so with that, we have a special guest here this evening who I know wanted to share some of his observations with us. So, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thanks. Hey, all. I'm not on this side of the podium that often, so I'm Lee Kyriakou. I am not here as a private citizen. I'm here as the mayor. I will not be speaking on any subject matter, even though some of them are in my neighborhood, but you'll do great on your own, and I'll stay away from all of them. I'm mostly here just to say thank you. For those on the board, your volunteers, you're our, most important board. The council doesn't really count, not us, right? You're the front line in a lot of ways. I mean, and I just want to say thank you. We've got a new member, David, thanks for coming up, and I appreciate all your service on the Zoning Board of Appeals. And I just note that you are in the front line, that it's hard, both because it's arcane and a lot of opinions are ardent, and on the ardent, people want to come and talk, and we're here to hear them. And I, sitting in that chair, it's hard at council sometimes because what people want to talk about, you just have to figure it out, how to let those opinions come to the fore, and to allow them to come out. And it's going to lengthen our meetings sometimes, and it's okay. On the arcane side, you've got help. The average human being doesn't have a clue of what the rules are and how this works and what the law is, but that's why the professionals are here. I thank you all for your help too, and please help the board. And when things get tough, figure out how to help them some more, right? I think the trainings are important. One suggestion was that maybe we could isolate the half hours, label them as to the topic, and stick them on the website. And so if people wanted to get those bits of training, they might be able to figure out from the title which one's which and listen in. And I like that idea, and wanted to propose it to Pete and see if they might be able to pull that off. You don't have to do anything. I think it's on Pete to do. And so that might help it along. The other one just is that when things are tough, the professionals help them out, right? You may have to step in. Might be hard for a chair to, tell somebody you're being a little bit online, or, to help explain what the rules are or what the parameters are on an issue. And so, where that's appropriate, help the crowd to, help the audience to understand what those arcane parameters are, or if need be, help the board, although I trust they're usually pretty well trained, and oftentimes the ones you're trying to help is the audience to understand how best to express their opinions on an issue. So I just wanted to say that. I also just note that the governor's State of the State today focused on two significant issues. One was on public safety, which is not your concern, but the other one is proposing up to 800,000 units of housing in New York State in the next 10 years. And some of those proposals will include state legislation to impose requirements on municipalities, particularly in the metro region, and that's just going to make the issues harder. Not to say that I would disagree. I've written a letter in the past to the governor supporting those proposals because we have to address the housing issues in the region, but it's not going to make it easy, and you're still on the front line, and that's going to make it harder. So just, more than anything else, just noting that. Lastly, sometimes your meetings run really long. I'm unbelievably grateful when you do that. Give yourselves a break. If you need to split it up, do it. I know some of you commute, and so you got to get up the next morning, I know you got a new commuter as well. I've done it on and off, well, pretty much on for 30 years while serving on council, and I know it's hard. So give yourselves a break where it's appropriate, and thank you. And that's all I got.
Thank you, Lee.
Yeah, my
Appreciate
pleasure.
it. Okay, so just a few other items kind of new for the new year. Drew and I discussed, and we'll continue this as we continue the meetings with Jennifer throughout the year. But as we introduce the items on the agenda, we'll ask Drew to just give us a kind of a summary of a little bit more of the specifics of the application, just to kind of level set where we're at in the review and what specifically we're focusing on for this part of our review. A lot of our reviews are months long, right? And many months. So it's always good, I think, to just kind of get a snapshot of, for the particular meeting that we're at, where we're at in that particular review. So we're going to try that out tonight. And just another component, Jennifer was good enough at the start of the meeting to share just a little bit more in addition as far as just kind of an opening statement. And so I'll welcome you all to the January 2023 meeting of the City of Beacon Planning Board. My name is John Gunn. I'm the chairman, obviously, of the board. And joining us tonight are board members Karen Kiana. Len Werner is not with us tonight. He's been excused. Mr. Kevin Byrne. Kevin. Joe Reynolds. And we're so happy to welcome David Jensen, formerly our zoning board chair, as our new member of the board. Welcome. We're very grateful for you having agreed to join us. We're also joined by, as Lee mentioned, our staff of consultants, phenomenal consultants. I know you've been working with us for years now, and we rely quite heavily on your expertise, and it's invaluable. So our consultants, city planner John Clark, good to see you, 2023. Our city engineer John Russo of Lankentelli. Our new city building inspector, Bruce Flower. Welcome, Happy New Year. And as well, at times we're joined by, I don't think, oh, there he is. Hi, Frank Stark. Stark Hip. And sometimes Frank Feliciato of Creighton Manning. And of course, tonight with us, Drew Gamels, and regularly our city attorney is Jennifer Gray. Thanks for standing in. The application materials that will be discussed tonight, including any memos from our staff, and we covered this somewhat in our rules and procedures, and consultants and proposed resolutions and other documents are always all available on the city's website and available to the public. Also on the city's website is a link to the Planning Board's rules of procedure, as we mentioned, and I just wanted to take a minute to explain a little bit further, in addition to what we discussed just now, about some of our procedures. We'll obviously hear each application in order of its notice on the agenda, and typically our process is for each application we'll first hear from the applicant, and then we'll hear also from our city's consultants. They spend quite a bit of time in advance of each meeting performing very detailed reviews, again, much to our benefit. We always have those in advance, so we're also able to benefit from those detailed reviews. And so we like to hear from our consultants as a part of the process of reviewing those applications. If a matter is scheduled for public hearing, the board will then open floor to comments from the public. If you wish to comment, please step to the podium when called upon. Clearly state your name and address for the record. All comments should be directed to the planning board, not to the applicant or city staff or consultants, and please limit your comments to no more than 5 minutes. In recent meetings where we know we've had very long agendas, we've limited it to 3. We do have one public hearing tonight, so we'll go 5 on comments. And again, based on the time of night or number of items remaining on the agenda, we ask you to, we will ask to limit to three minutes. We also ask that, and again, this is for the benefit of efficient meetings. If refrain from repeating comments that you've already heard stated. If you agree with the previous commenter, please let us know. But there's no need to repeat the substance of the comment. We work very hard to administer a fair and open meeting that allows everyone an opportunity to speak without requiring our staff, consultants, and board members to be here, obviously, hopefully, until the early morning hours. Also, the public comment period of an application is not designed to be a question and answer period. I think sometimes it gets a little challenging when, of course, people really need to be heard, and we do everything in our power to make sure they're heard. Sometimes it spills over into conversation amongst other members of the public. We really try to refrain from, and I actively work to make sure that that doesn't happen. There's a very good reason for that. And if we would like the city consultant or the applicant to address or respond to comments, we will make that inquiry. And please rest assured that all comments are taken into consideration when we render our final decision. Again, it's already been mentioned, all emails and other written correspondence sent to the planning board secretary has been received and reviewed by the board and will also be made part of the official record for the application. And lastly, the board's authority and jurisdiction is delegated to the planning board from the city council through local laws codified in the City of Beacon Code. Sometimes we receive comments that are beyond our jurisdiction to handle or address. We will try to identify any of those comments for you and let you know where they may be better directed. Ultimately, our final decision on an application must have a rational basis in the record. This means we cannot vote based on our gut or our personal feelings or reactions. Our decisions must be consistent with the city code and consistent with the evidence before us. So thank you for the patience with that. And again, also just for the public, I'll mention we're all residents of Beacon too. We're all neighbors of one another. We're all your neighbors. A lot of us here have raised our kids together into young adulthood, college-age kids. We love this city just as much as you do. And we're here because of that. We're here spending our time serving because of that. So I just want to make everyone aware that we're also members of this community, and we care deeply about the types of things that affect all of us, including development. So thank you for that. And with that, we'll go to our first order of business, and that is to, unless there are any changes or modifications to, that's a little redundant, the meeting notes, I'll accept a motion to accept last month's meeting notes into the record.
Motion.
Motion by Karen.
Second.
Second by Kevin. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great. So we'll go to our first agenda item. And for the public, anyone here for the Prophecy Theater, 1113 Wolcott Avenue, that has been adjourned at the request of the applicant. So we'll jump to item number 2 on our agenda, which is the continued public hearing for SECRA environmental review on an application for subdivision approval at 12 Highland Place. And Drew, you want to just do a quick kind of recap of where we've been? Yep.
Recap. Applicant is proposing to subdivide a 1.07 acre parcel with one existing house into 5 lots for the construction of 4 additional houses. The parcel to be subdivided is split between the R15 and the R110 zoning district. This action is an unlisted action under the State Environmental Quality Review Act, or SEQR as we keep saying. At this time, the Planning Board is evaluating the potential for significant environmental impacts under SEQR. There is a draft negative declaration available for the Planning Board's consideration. The next steps would include completing SEQR. If a negative declaration is adopted, the Planning Board may set a public hearing on the subdivision for February. If a positive declaration is adopted, it would move on to an environmental impact statement process.
Wonderful. Thank you. And SECRA, I always like to practice it. State Environmental Quality Review Act. Sometimes that's hard to get out. So, great. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Happy New Year, everyone. Welcome to the board, Mr. Jensen. For the record, my name is Taylor Palmer. I'm a partner with the law firm of Cuddy & Fader on behalf of the applicant. Tonight, I am joined by our project engineer, Mike Bodendorf of Hudson Land Design. We're also joined by Gary Joseph, the applicant. We're also joined by my colleague, as she's now known in the office, Hudson Valley, Allie Fausner. So Allie is joining us, associate out of Fishkill office. As the chairman and Drew just mentioned, we are before you this evening in connection with the seeker review of the application for a residential subdivision of 5 lots at 12 Highland Place. Since we do get paid by the word, Drew, next time maybe, hopefully I can steal some of those talking points back. Following the applicant's last appearance before the planning board, which was actually back in November, the applicant has been working diligently to address the comments from the board, the public, and of course your consultants. Indeed, the applicant did adjourn from your December meeting agenda so that we can continue to adjust the program to make it a zoning compliant subdivision that incorporates enhanced site access and landscaping, as well as maintaining reduced impervious surface areas and mitigating against any potentially significant adverse environmental impacts, as the chairman mentioned in the seeker review. As Mike will review in a minute, particularly for the benefit of new members on the board, the updates to the plans also ensure that the lot area and the depths for lots 1 and 2 are zoning compliant. That was an issue from a prior redesign that's since been updated from the private road layout to the shared driveways. As is more fully detailed in our December 27th submission to you all, and our meeting with the planning board staff on December 13th, the lot dimensions are now in conformance with the zoning code, and the wider private road has been eliminated for a tree-lined driveway, which Mike will review in a moment. The lot layout and the proposed features also include the reduced impervious surface areas noted in our November 29th submission, and they remain consistent throughout with the lot area and lot configuration and the frontages, which of course there's also a memorandum from the city attorney, which she may reference as the comments from the consultants move forward. We did note in our December 27th submission, this tree-lined driveway is designed to enhance the aesthetics of the project. Importantly, the driveways also provide sufficient firematic access. Mike will also speak to his communications with the building department and the communications that have relayed from the fire department. As also noted in our November 29th submission, notwithstanding that there is sufficient firematic access for these residential homes, our property is also surrounded pretty much on all 4 corners, 3 of the 4 corners, by existing fire hydrants in the area. So it's a fire hydrant island.
I'm sorry, are you saying the word firematic?
Yeah.
Okay, I've just never heard that word before, thank you.
It's not a word.
Okay.
It's I guess I'm trying to claim it as a term of art. It's usable to just say that the EMS and fire department apparatus
okay.
have access to the site and have.
Got it, thank you.
No problem.
Firematic.
You heard right. As requested by Mr. Clark, we also updated the tree removal and tree planting plan for the project, so that's on the application, and we noted the details of the number of trees we've added over what was existing and previously proposed. We'd also note that we had further contact with neighbors and those that were on the public hearing notice list. We held meetings, 2 informal meetings, on Wednesday, November 30th, and then another on December 3rd, again trying to solicit additional feedback with respect to the redesign and the design for the project in general. In addition to the additional screening we've already proposed, Mr. Russo's comment noted that we should include some additional along the property boundary with one of the existing residences. We certainly have no objection to that, and I think that's an appropriate inclusion here. So with that, again, I'll turn to Mike Bodendorf, please, to walk particular new members just through the updated design reflective of those comments.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Taylor. For the record, Mike Bodendorf, engineer for the project. So the last layout before you, again, I'll just give a quick rundown of the proposed subdivision. 5 lots. 3 lots are located in the R15 zoning district. 2 lots are located in the R10 zoning district. The zoning district line pretty much bifurcates the existing lot from north to south. As Taylor mentioned, all lots are compliant with zoning in terms of lot area, setbacks, and so forth. The biggest difference between this layout and the last layout that was before you with a private road is we are back to shared driveways, and we have added trees in between the driveways and additional trees around the perimeter of the subject property to further enhance the aesthetics of the subdivision.
Sorry, real quick, if I'm not mistaken, the new curb cuts, there's 3 of them now.
There are 3 curb cuts.
What would be considered the southmost one is roughly in the same location as the existing access currently,
Correct.
right?
Yes. As Taylor also mentioned, we did prepare updated fire access plan. I won't call it firematic. that demonstrates that a fire apparatus can enter the shared driveway with cars parked on the opposite side of the road and exit that driveway. We did provide that with our last submittal.
That's your beacon ladder truck tracking document?
Correct. I can put that up.
Yeah, it might be helpful for the public. You're showing turning radiuses.
Yeah, and the truck dimensions were provided to us from the fire chief, so this matches their fire apparatus. You can see it with cars parked on the opposite side of the road. It can still enter the driveway. Mr. Russo has asked us to take a look at the width of the throats of the road as they meet the pavement of Highland Place to see if we can reduce those a little bit, and we'll take a harder look at that and to try to further reduce impervious on the project.
You're talking about what I usually refer to as the skirts?
Yeah,
Of
flares,
the new driveway? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
A couple different terms for it. Mhm. And so the idea would be to try to start to minimize those a little bit more?
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
And that's generally it. I can answer any questions that any board members may have.
None other than the ones I just asked. Anyone else on the board, questions at the moment? Okay. Anything further from the group?
Not for now, no. We have an existing open secret public hearing.
Yeah.
We did, as the chair mentioned previously, we did previously notice for the subdivision hearing, but we'll be asking the board to consider setting or resetting that subdivision public hearing for a future meeting date, but we're certainly welcome to hear and respond to any comments from the public or the board or its consultants.
Sure, great. So we'll go to our consultants now. John, Mr. Clark, we'll look forward to your most recent thoughts.
We did find that the previous private road arrangement didn't comply with the section of the subdivision regulations, and we informed the applicant, and they have gone back to a common driveway approach, which is permitted under the code, up to 2 driveways, 2 houses, 2 lots per driveway. So the plan as proposed appears zoning compliant. The other 2 remarks I have are minor glitches on the plans, just so they match up, nothing substantive.
Thank you. Mr. Russo.
So as Mr. Clark stated, they've gone to common driveways. As part of that, they'll have to develop maintenance declarations and agreements as far as how those common driveways will be maintained with the individuals. They will need to prepare construction cost estimates for performance guarantees for any work within the city's right-of-way. We'd also like to see if they could regrade the common driveways to more or less direct and shed water towards their drainage collection system, so that it's not shedding out onto Highland Place.
Which is, forgive me, this new element represented here.
Yes, that's a
Yeah.
catch basin there, and then there's an inlet on the other side from the other parcel. And then we have some other cleanup notes with regards to the subdivision plan, the easements. There was one easement that was crossing lot number 2 in the corner. It was unclear as to why it was crossing there. We've asked the applicant to take a look at it, see if it's needed. If it's not, revise the easement. And that's what we have at this point.
Thoughts on the easement?
With respect to the easements, we can either typically redraft them as conditions to the approval for the city attorney's review and review by the consultants to line up any easement areas that are drawn by the surveyor, but we're certainly pleased to prepare drafts if the board sees fit beforehand, but typically it's done as a condition.
Yeah, no, that understood. Just wanted to see if there were any thoughts you had or anything else you needed from us.
So it wasn't drafting the easements at this point, as there's an easement line that crosses one of the parcels that could be eliminated.
Okay.
So it's just revising it on the drawing, actually, at this point.
Understood. We can adjust.
We have no objection to that.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Just coming after my job, Mr. Russo, I get it.
Quickly around the board, questions specifically as it relates to SECRA. and anything the applicant has shared with us about their updated planning.
I have a question about the concerns brought up by neighbors about safety issues and sidewalks. And I know, that this is an issue not just for this development in particular, but there are a lot of situations like this throughout the city about, lack of sidewalks. And, in this process, is there some way that we can address that issue?
As far as sidewalks, good question.
Yeah, I mean, the city, every block in the city should have sidewalks. This neighborhood does not, for the most part. And it is reasonable, if there's a sidewalk to connect to ask the applicant to provide a sidewalk that connects to an existing sidewalk. But it isn't generally reasonable to consider an applicant to put in sidewalks that don't go to any other sidewalks. Unless there's some city plan to institute sidewalks in that neighborhood or something. This is an area of the city that has very narrow streets and no sidewalks. And the applicant can't be considered able to fix the problems of the city outside the boundaries of their property, generally speaking.
Okay. Anything else?
Well, that's
Before we
sort
go
of
to
a
public.
catch-22, isn't it?
Well, like I said, if there's sidewalks in the neighborhood and you can start building a connection system, that's one thing.
That's what I mean.
There
Yeah,
is-
there isn't, who's
right.
going to build the first side?
Well, the city generally
City.
builds the first sidewalks.
There
and then-
is a sidewalk on Grove Street. It's on the opposite side of the street, and it's like, catty corner from the corner of of this property.
It's quite a ways, as I remember.
On the uphill side, you're talking.
Yeah, it's, right. It's on the opposite side of, there is a sidewalk that ends roughly around the corner of Anderson Street on the
Yeah.
south side of Grove.
Yeah.
So, there could be a crosswalk.
Crosswalk at the edge of that hill would be a
Site distance.
difficult proposition
On the downhill side?
on the uphill side, on the uphill, where this property would have a crosswalk.
You're talking about Grove?
Yeah.
There's one that is along here. It stops in the middle of the block. It stops, yeah, basically.
So, yeah, it looks like the sidewalk could cross Grove Street. The sidewalk stops on Grove, runs from Jackson to about across from where Anderson is. Going by Google Maps, it's not that exact. Is there room, I was curious, just looking at the plan, is there room, for instance, for a sidewalk between the street and the, is it called Gabion Wall?
Gabion?
Gabion?
No,
2 feet.
There's not.
Yeah, well, that would have to encroach into the roadway, which is already narrow to begin with.
Yeah, it's a tough hill to deal with.
So we just moved the Gabion Wall.
Is the Gabion Wall is on the applicant's property, or is that on city?
It's on the city.
It's on city
City's
property.
right away.
Got it. Oh, I see that. I see the property line here.
There's the intersection. That's Anderson, and this is Grove, and that's where the sidewalk ends.
Yeah,
So,
Down the hill.
that's at the bottom.
yeah.
Mr. Russo's office made a lot of history with that location and what went into that and why sidewalks weren't originally put in there, because I believe they were considered by the city in that location and then not pursued.
Well, they were looked at. The city, one, when they had that road reconstructed, did not want to spend the money for determination of right-of-ways. along the road. And two, they were looking at improvements of the road and the utilities itself, and not so much as sidewalks at that time, because sidewalks weren't truly existent in that
Right.
area.
Right.
And that was 20-something
20
years
years,
ago.
yep.
Oh, wow. I didn't know you were that old.
Thanks, John.
So safe to say, currently, the city has no plans.
At present, they do
afoot.
not have any.
Is there any traffic calming, issues or strategies that we could, incorporate?
They're already pretty narrow. Usually one of the traffic calming things would be to narrow the streets to slow people down.
Some signs?
We have the traffic engineer here.
Yeah,
so
Mr. Kipp.
Streets are already pretty narrow.
You did offer your observations, your written observations to the application, right?
I haven't actually reviewed this
Oh,
site
okay.
since it's been under secret review, but yes, as far as traffic calming, I mean, one of the first things they would do would be to narrow the streets, and I think that wouldn't fall on the planning board. That would be something you could possibly recommend to the Traffic Safety Commission if they look at the neighborhood, but I don't think that would fall on this applicant or on this project.
Great, thank you. We do have that ability, if we'd like to, we can discuss it as a board to, and I would be in favor of it, to recommend this to the Traffic and Safety Committee for their review. Any thoughts on that?
I would agree.
Well, as the planning board representative on the Traffic and Safety Committee,
There you go. For your
I-
review.
I didn't even know we had such a position. It's going to be yours. Yes, I think that's the least we could do.
Yeah. So, to that end, I'll accept a motion to recommend a review by the Traffic and Safety Committee.
Motion.
For their observations and feedback. Motion by, was that Karen?
Second.
Second by Jill, all in favor?
Aye.
Great, so with that, unless there's anything else, questions, thoughts, we'll go to the public for our currently open secret public hearing. What? Come on.
Thomas Wright, 24 Grove Street. Good evening. Thank you all for your service to this community. As I've stated in my previous comments regarding the subdivision, my main concern is the lack of frontage for lots 1, 2, and 3. I've read the comments of other neighbors, and clearly the lack of frontage is a serious concern of theirs as well. To be clear, this cannot be brushed aside as NIMBY whining. Rather, it is simply pointing out the lack of frontage is an impact that should be considered in the secret hearing. So, as I did in November, I call attention to the statement provided in the support of NEGDEC declaration, which says that, quote, the proposed action is generally consistent with the character of the existing neighborhood, unquote. As I asked in November, how could the proposed subdivision be described as consistent with the character of the existing neighborhood, given that there are no other residences in the neighborhood that lack frontage in the form of direct access to the street? How can it be described as consistent, given the frequency and variety of complaints about frontage that have been posed by people who live in the neighborhood in question? I believe that it is incumbent upon the planning board to describe in detail how the lack of frontage and the use of common private drives, now shared private drives and shared sidewalks, the lack of frontage necessitates, is consistent with the character of the existing neighborhood. I also want to briefly comment on the note in the agenda packet from Paul Lyons. I was also at the meeting held by the developer in Hudson Land Design, and his characterization of the meeting as one where the applicant had their mind made up and were unwilling to make concessions to the neighbors is accurate. I didn't have high expectations for the meeting, but I did expect that the applicant would at least pretend to listen to the voices of the neighbors. Unfortunately, this is not what happened. As a result, the meeting was a frustrating waste of my time. It occurs to me that this is really the heart of the matter. Having the voices of the community heard, one would think that this is fundamental to the concept of a public hearing. Voting to support a neg deck without addressing legitimate concerns, in this case, the issue of frontage, by neighbors will add to frustration and leave the community believing that there isn't sufficient hearing happening at the hearings. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask ask a question of the comment?
You may.
Thank you. Can you say something about how the lack of frontage would affect the community?
Yeah, I'm talking about the existing patterns that are part of the neighborhood, that make the neighborhood what they are. And it is generally consistent throughout Beacon, but in that neighborhood in particular, you will find that every single house is immediately apparent what the front of the house is, how you might get to the front of the house, what the relationship of that residence is to the street. I think that has a very profound impact on the neighborhood, and having something which is ambiguous leaves the general public, but certainly the neighbors, in question of what exactly is going on in this neighborhood. I mean, I think the private drive is also something which undermines the pattern of the neighborhood, because you do not see that anywhere else in the neighborhood. But I really wanted to hear from the board or the consultants about this issue of frontage. And I get that there is an academic or an abstract way to look at frontage, which is the side of the property which is on the street. But that is different from what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a character of the neighborhood being driven by whether the house has its back to the street or its front to the street. Does that answer your question, Jill?
Yeah, I'm wondering if if that's something that could be helped with just the design of the houses themselves, if they were designed so that visually the front of the house, design-wise, actually faced the street.
Yeah, so in lot number 3, for example, and I know this probably didn't intend this to be a back and forth, but lot number 3, which is the most landlocked of all of them, I'm not sure what that would be. I suppose, would that be Grove Street or Anderson? Both of them have extreme topographical issues that would make having a front challenging.
Yeah, so we stated our rules and then we immediately bent them. But that's fine. No,
Sorry,
that's absolutely fine. So yeah, let's talk a little bit more about frontage, and specifically as it relates to what you mentioned in context of SECRA about the character. So Jennifer was kind enough to, as far as some of the more critical items that we've been, you're welcome to, thanks, that we've been reviewing as a part of this application, specifically in regard to frontage. And I've found this very helpful in at least my review of some of these complex matters. Section 19520B of the code, frontage on improved streets, states the area proposed to be subdivided shall have frontage on and direct access to a street duly placed on the official map, and if such street is not improved to the satisfaction of the planning board, such improvements shall be conditioned of subdivision approval. So we have some leeway around the condition of the street itself as it relates to frontage. But so the observation is each of the proposed lots has frontage on a street placed on the official map. Each of the proposed lots also has direct access to a street placed on the official map. Direct access includes access via easement over common driveway. Section 19520B of the City Code is similar to New York State General Law Section 36, which requires a proposed structure to have access to a suitably improved street on an official map. So that criteria exists already in terms of a suitably improved street. And then this was also helpful, just in terms of
Improved street or improved building?
improved street.
I'm sorry, I don't understand that.
Again, this is just language relative to what needs to be in place prior to the issuance of a building permit. But, and I'm just going through this because there's helpful information here relative to each of these particular lots and how their frontage is defined. Frontage, Lot 1, frontage on Highland Place and Grove Street has direct access to Highland Place. Frontage on Grove Street, direct access to Highland Place via easement over common driveway, right? Lot 3, frontage on Grove Street and Anderson Street, direct access to Highland Place via easement over common driveway. Lot 4, frontage on Anderson Street, direct access to Highland Place via easement over common driveway. Lot 5, frontage on Highland Place, direct access to on Highland Place. The point here is that based on the criteria for frontage and the specific reading of the code and requirements relative to the improved streets and the improvements on the lots for access goes into defining the frontage. That's how I'm reading it.
Yeah.
And so each of these do have specific frontage. And then back to your question about, because we don't have the benefit of designed homes at this point, how, because right now this is all about moving through SECRA, this, and any issue as it relates to SECRA rising to the level of significant adverse impact. And then through site plan approval, subdivision approval, all without, because this is typically how these applications go, the benefit, we just have pads here. We don't have designed homes. Those come later, right? So you can reasonably say, yes, and we will have some impact and influence on this when applicants come to us for certificates of appropriateness for each of these lots. How that frontage is, basically becomes manifest, right? So the frontage and the character, to some degree, and to your question, will be driven by the design of these homes, right? So the technical nature of frontage has been achieved by the, by the application and the configuration. Then the question is, the sort of more broad question about the aesthetic and the character, right? So what I'm getting at is that the potential does exist for that to take place. Is that helpful?
It's helpful to me. I mean, I understand that it's basically, it will be decided in the design phase. That's what we're saying.
Yes, and so to that end, though, inherently the lots themselves, the configuration, they technically meet the requirements, but also they provide the inherent possibility for them to meet character as well through the design of the homes.
I would just note for the benefit of the board, the existing home, which you can see on the screen in the top left corner of the site plan itself, actually faces Highland Place. So it's set back pretty much as far back in the lot as it can go, albeit as frontage in a separate road. It's generally consistent with that character, and you all run into this all the time with corner lots in particular. This one happens to be a triple play, of course.
The question of which one's the front
Right.
on a corner lot. Yeah.
Right. So this issue does come up and is generally consistent with lots that have multiple frontages.
May I ask a question?
Yes, you may.
I'm curious about the walkway that connects lots 1, 2, and 3 along what would be the Grove Street side. Could you speak to, does each house just own the portion of the walkway that is on their lot, or how do you see that functioning?
Yes. So how that came about, or?
No, does each house only own the portion, owns the portion of the walkway? So
Yes.
if I'm in Lot 3 and it's a snowy day
Yeah.
and I want to get down that walkway, I am depending on my neighbors to, basically shovel their portion of the walkway.
Correct, similar to how everybody's sidewalk they're required to shovel their sidewalk.
So it's basically a private sidewalk.
Correct.
Thank you.
Notably, these were also modified based on public comments too. So originally there was a separate access mechanism, but these were refined to reflect public comments to make these the system of walkways.
And keep in mind, board and public, we will have the opportunity to continue to ask those kinds of questions and hear input from the public and continue to discuss this in the subdivision part of the show, you know. So, great question. Just as it relates to SECRA and the open public hearing, anyone else from the public?
Nicole Gifford, 21 Highland Place. Our concerns continue to be rooted in the fact that all 5 properties, the access to those properties or the true front of the house where residents and their guests are going to enter or exit, where their garbage is going to be retrieved, where their mail is going to be delivered, is on one street and not shared across the 3 streets that are being called frontage. Our concerns about increased traffic, safety, parking have not been addressed with the updated plans. On the emergency vehicle plan, will there be any parking regulations on the new homeowners on the west side of Highland? If not, it's likely that the residents and or guests would park on that side of the street since there's no parking or access to the homes via Grover Anderson, which would prevent the vehicles from accessing those lots. The proposal claims there will be no significant adverse impact on traffic. The idea that doubling the amount of homes, people, cars that can only funnel in and out of a tiny street will not result in a significant change in traffic is simply not true. And that the guideline being used is anything less than 100 trips during a peak hour for a residential block doesn't seem like an appropriate threshold. We're talking about the narrowness of the streets, we're talking about the danger of Grove Street. I think that this increased level of density is inappropriate for the street the size of Highland to bear the brunt of without any true frontage that helps alleviate traffic flow, which raises, again, safety concerns for the existing and new residents. Thanks.
Thank you.
Teresa Kraft, Liberty Street. Thanks for reminding us that the planning board holds more power than you realize. As an appointed body, you can change the outcome of this extensive build-out proposed by the city, using the city's own code. Simply put, follow the city Environmental Quality Code 107-3, intent. C, protection of the environment and the enhancement of human and community resources shall be given appropriate weight along with social and economic considerations, and all these factors shall be considered together in reaching decisions on proposed actions. A suitable balance of social, economic, and environmental factors shall be incorporated into the planning and decision-making process of all agencies. The environment, as described in the city code, the physical conditions which will be affected by a proposed action, including land, air, water, minerals, flora, fauna, noise, features of historic and or aesthetic significance, existing patterns of population concentration, distribution or growth, and existing community or neighborhood character. Not much has changed by the developer to scale back this overdevelopment on a tiny parcel. With all the public pushback at previous public hearings, the developer is still uncompromising and not willing to work with his direct neighbors, clearly tone deaf. As a resident in the project area, I am one of hundreds that will be affected daily. Looking at the packet's Exhibit A ladder truck tracking, the submitted drawing showing a single fire truck maneuvering. It's a one-way in, dead-end type driveway with no space to maneuver any size large truck, much less a fire truck. And the plat reads, fire truck not to scale. What else isn't? Typically, there are more than one fire trucks at the scene of a fire. I think the city should take lessons from the fire that occurred on Wolcott Avenue just 1 week ago. It takes a lot of space for fire and rescue crews to put out a fire, and that event had a major wide open roadway and staging area. The proposed house located on the northwest lot, number 3, stands no chance of safety. If something should happen within this small shared driveway location, it will be a disaster waiting to happen. All the more reasons to cut back on the flooding of the city with accessory dwellings on every parcel. I'm urging the planning board to draw the line and preserve our neighborhoods and our quality of life. Please deny any approval for this project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Happy New Year. Jody Macredo, 11
Happy New
Highland.
Year.
There's more to our zoning than lot size, and a 1 acre lot in the same zoning district that possessed direct street frontage to streets that it actually accessed or sat on a much wider street with sidewalks would result in an entirely different conversation. But that is not the case with 12 Highland. As was mentioned previously, no zoning laws can spot zone specific problematic lots such as this one, and that is why we have planning boards. Our code states that the maneuvering area needed to permit parked vehicles to enter and exit off-street parking spaces shall have a width of at least 24 feet. These shared driveways are only 18 feet wide, and Highland itself is only 22 feet. How is a vehicle supposed to maneuver into a spot in one of these driveways, particularly in Lot 2, especially if there's already a car in there? How are neighbors going to handle basic issues like snow removal? Lot 3 in particular looks like a nightmare for that. How much of the city's time and resources are going to be taken up when one homeowner doesn't have the money on hand for required maintenance or when they disagree on plowing services? I know that the city has approved subdivisions in the past that have ended up costing taxpayers money. Who is responsible for arbitrating these issues as they arise? This particular developer, under the name Beacon Contracting, is already engaged in a legal battle stemming from another project in the city. Our code also states the area proposed to be subdivided shall have frontage on and direct access to a street duly placed on the official map. And if such street is not improved to the satisfaction of the planning board, such improvement shall be a condition of subdivision approval. Highland Place would have to be significantly improved and widened for the subdivision to be safe, convenient, and good for the welfare of the people who live there. I really appreciate the discussion that you just had, but pointing out how dangerous it is and the fact that we can't make it less dangerous isn't a reason to make it more dangerous. An issue brought up at the last hearing was emergency vehicle access with cars parked on both sides of Highland, raising potential issues of limiting parking on the east side. The applicant submitted a response to that, but it contained no vehicles on the west side of Highland. So that doesn't resolve the issue, it just moves it from one side of the street to the other. With the large curb cuts shown for the driveways, the new residents will be forced to park on the east side anyway, which is where all the visitors on Grove park, since there is no space for parked cars there, which still leaves us unable to park in front of our homes. Their response also showed the cars parked on the east side pretty much on my grass. Where are my kids supposed to play? How are the people in the neighborhood supposed to ride their bikes and walk their dogs? What happens when there's snow on the road? Where do the 10 garbage and recycling cans from all of these homes coming out of 2 shared driveways that are right next to each other supposed to fit into this where all of these cars are there? Our city code states the planning board shall comply with seeker prior to granting any approvals. It may present and analyze in general terms hypothetical scenarios that could and are likely to occur. Everyone who has visited this area understands the limitations of this space and can clearly see that this project will result in unsafe conditions for everyone who lives on Highland and every child who walks past it to Main Street or any of our schools, including Forest Hill Elementary, which is right down the road. This project creates an alarming precedent for creating dangerous and unnecessary congestion in our neighborhoods. It will significantly decrease the quality of life for all residents in the area, which is why more than 200 of your neighbors have already signed a petition urging you not to allow this to happen. No one is disputing this developer's right to build and make his money. He would still make plenty of money just flipping the existing house on the property, and he would make even more with the 2 additional homes that the property actually has the frontage for and access to. Allowing 5 lots to be crammed into this space would be detrimental to the health, safety, convenience, and well-being of everyone in the area, and it should not be permitted. I also have here, I know this was emailed to you, but it was emailed to you late in the day, and I know that you guys all work and you might not have seen it. But this is the applicant's rendering of the fire truck access. A friend of mine did a little work on it and showed what it would actually look like with all of the cars there and with the cars parked on the east side of Main Street, actually parked the way cars normally park on the street instead of on my grass. So I have that. I have smaller copies for you guys to take a look at. If you want a bigger copy, it'll be back here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, we have that electronically as well. Thank you. Just since it's come up now the second time in public comment, this concept of spot zoning, which at least as far as my understanding of what spot zoning is, not something that's occurring here. I was just wondering if you could just, Drew, help define the topic of spot zoning.
Sure. Spot zoning occurs when the governing body adopts legislation or zoning legislation to rezone a parcel on its own that is not compliant with anything surrounding it. So say you have an R1 property and you're going to rezone just that one parcel for multifamily when it's not connected to any other multifamily zoning district. That would be spot zoning. You're rezoning a single parcel to benefit that property owner. That's not occurring here. This is not spot zoning. There is no zoning that's changing.
Right,
and
so
then this
spot zoning would require some form of rezoning.
correct.
Right, so which is not taking place here.
Correct.
Right.
They
Okay.
are not amending the zoning whatsoever. They're working within the confines of the two zoning districts that exist.
Got it. Yeah, I understand. I had heard the term twice, once in earlier public comment and now tonight, so I just wanted to make sure that for the topic of spot zoning, that we were all clear on what that means. Great. Anyone else from the public? So let's talk about a few of the things that we've heard concerns raised about. Oh, I'm sorry, please. Yes, please.
My name's Everett Gifford. I live at 21 Highland. I'm not going to reiterate everything, but you guys already brought up the 22312 regarding street frontage, which I think is really at the heart of this issue. At least in my opinion, it seems like the only recourse we have is the planning board and how it pertains to building shared driveways and all that. So, in my opinion, and I think I know of the opinion of my neighbors, is that the current plan is going to put too many people all within that area, and with the only access actually being Highland Place. I mean, I think like the idea of the access to Highland Place but frontage is a bit of a workaround. So it would be great if it could be reduced, the overall number of people who are going to be eventually living there. And I think the talk on sidewalks was interesting to me because while I agree, I don't think that the applicant would have to build sidewalks all the way down to Grove. There's not enough room to do that anyway. The fact of the matter is that the current layout doesn't allow for, or it isn't really suited for that many people all going right on Highland Place. So, you know, I really think it comes back to the fact of whether building private shared driveways on this kind of unique piece of property is going to have everyone's best safety in mind. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, my name's Patty Galiberta. I live on 43 Grove Street. And every month I say to myself, why do I keep going to these meetings? And this time, there was something sticking in my head, and it was a meeting I had with Gary while we were sitting on my front porch. And I asked Gary, why are you doing this? And he very honestly and very quickly said to me, because I can. And I said, what do you mean you can? And he said, the city makes these zoning rules, not me. They say I can do it, so I'm doing it. And I said, but it's going to ruin our neighborhood. But I can do it, he said. So I want you to think about that, because it's stuck in my head. Then I looked at his blueprints, and I said, but you don't have enough room in the front. I'm looking at the setbacks, and you don't have enough in the front. And he goes, yeah, I do. They changed the setbacks. Well, when did they do that? Just a little while ago. Well, I got notice of this meeting, and I'm here because I got notice, but they changed the setbacks by 10 feet, cutting away 10 feet of road frontage. We didn't get notice of that, and it was for all this R110 or 111, whatever it is. Okay, so that allowed him to put a bigger house on a smaller piece of property with less frontage, and he can't even access Grove Street from them. He can't access Anderson. But then I said, okay, this is environment. environment, how does it affect the community? You're doubling the size of the neighborhood. You're not only doubling the size of the neighborhood, but you're doubling the number of people. And 2 of those houses on the corner of Grove and Highland have no backyards, have no side yards. If there's a fire between those 2 houses, they're both going up. I mean, the character of my neighborhood is everybody has a backyard. Everybody hangs out in the side yard. We don't all have front yards, that's true. But we have a little something. These guys don't. So I guess that's why I keep coming here, even though I hate public speaking. I keep trying it, so thank you for making me do that. But, I mean, I guess that's all I have to say. That doesn't, I don't know, as a neighbor who loves my neighbors, I'm not welcoming this. And I don't think it's safe. I walk every day, and I look really, really, really hard when I cross my street from Grove. I'm right at the top of the hill, so you don't know where I live, but I'm at the top of the hill, right before Highland. And I come out and I look this way and this way because cars go really fast, and it's a very narrow road, and there is no place for a sidewalk. I wish there was. I wish the road had been pushed, the wall had been pushed back so we could have had one. If you put one on my side, I have no sidewalk. I mean, I have no front yard. So and the road is very narrow. And if a bus is coming up it, a car's not going to. Or if a bus is going down it, we wait at the bottom of the hill. It's just what we do. Or we wait at the top of the hill. It's a dangerous corner, and I want Gary to make his money. But I think he could make his money and still have maybe 3 houses there or less. This is dangerous, and it's non-conforming. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you. John, I know recently the city went through a process of updating and sort of reorganizing some of the zoning tables in relationship to requirements. Did any of those changes affect setback requirements in any of our zones?
Yes, as part of the accessory apartment amendments, which the council discussed for over a year, they agreed to lower the front yard setbacks by 5 feet in every residential district, which would allow for bigger backyards and more possibility of accessory apartments, which was the goal of the amendments, is to encourage accessory apartments as providing a housing affordability and diversity way of looking at things. So the council did, after a year of looking at it, change the zoning setback from, in this district or in the R15 district, from, I think it was 15 feet to 10 feet. And in the 10 from 20 feet to 15 feet or something like that.
Right.
So they knocked 5 feet off all of the front yards in all of the residential districts, single-family residential
in
districts.
support of parcels having the capacity or capability to support accessory.
Right, and also the original standards, which date back to 1974, were fairly suburban in character. They had bigger setbacks than historically. That's why when a lot of new subdivisions come in, we actually ask the developer to come forward on the lot more than the setback allows. There's a provision in the code to allow that. Well, I recommended to the council, and they agreed that they should have shorter setbacks because historically we had Beacon had shorter setbacks in every district. And it would allow for bigger backyards. That was the point of it.
Right, and usually that's very helpful. I've seen it happen before where you have existing non-conforming, neighboring parcels that are existing non-conforming because the zoning changed.
Yes.
And then, you come along with a new building where the new setback requirement would mean it would sort of take away from the consistency along the frontage.
Right.
We've said, okay, move it up.
Now, there's a provision in the code that allows you to be consistent with the housing frontages along that portion of the block.
Yeah, and those changes, and I remember these because we review stuff like this before the council then.
Yeah. In this case, however, it should be noted that the housings haven't moved, even though the setback moved in the middle of this process. The housings haven't moved.
The place for this particular applicant.
For this particular applicant, they haven't moved the houses forward. They've provided the option now of having a covered porch instead of an open porch.
Right. Although, again, this is around the parcels, meaning,
Yeah.
and the pad is indicated.
Yeah,
but-
we can't predict exactly what the house is going to look like.
But we
However,
still
by
have the-
putting a sidewalk in there, it does promote the idea of people putting front doors facing
Sure.
the frontages of their block.
Yeah.
So the three houses that nominally face Grove Street will have a sidewalk connecting. Presumably, the owners will provide front access to those lots,
Let's hope
rather
it's
than
less
have
a
everything come
sidewalk.
off the rear.
Less a sidewalk, more a charming path. Sidewalk makes it, so it makes it sound like it's part of a boulevard, but anyway.
A private
sidewalk. Yes. Sorry,
A
Jill.
walkway, if you will.
I just wanted to say about the sidewalk that maybe that could be extended all the way across on top of the wall, or, above the wall.
But again, these are all site plan things that we will have the opportunity to get to and talk more about.
Well, the thing I'm concerned about is, in terms of the SECRA,
Yeah.
is that one provision, let me call it up here. Will the proposed action impair the character or quality of the existing community? And the feedback that we're getting from the community is saying, yes, it will.
Yes, it has to rise to a standard of a significant impact, though, and we can talk about what that means. Obviously, when you're living in an area that is being impacted by any kind of development, to you that feels like a significant impact, but we have somewhat of a different standard, right?
Right, and you're evaluating this for seeker purposes, so is it is it going to result in a significant environmental impact? And it's not a denial of the so you're evaluating for seeker purposes. You're not denying the project at this, or approving the project at this phase. You're making a decision on, do you want the applicant to evaluate that factor further and then do a environmental impact statement, which would mean that it goes to a scoping period where you'd evaluate, okay, what are the potential significant environmental impacts? Then they prepare a draft environmental impact statement. It's a process, and your decision tonight would mean, do they go through that process? A negative declaration just means that it's not going to have any, it's not going to result in any significant environmental impacts, and the applicant does not have to go forward with an environmental impact statement.
Right.
But you are not saying that the project is perfect the way it is, and you're not done with your review process. You are only done with this one aspect on the environmental issues.
Right, so thank you for that distinction. Hopefully that
And
helps.
if I may, Mr. Chairman, just one point of clarification too. From a community character standpoint, oftentimes you're looking at whether or not it's a profound departure or significant modification. If we were proposing a 3-story multifamily residence in a traditionally or fully, there was a previous discussion earlier about spot zoning. So putting multifamily tenancies in a single-family residential district. The applicant's proposing 5 single-family residences with generally consistent lot sizes for the area, not proposing a commercial use, not proposing any other uses. So it's in line with what the comprehensive plan is designed and the zoning is for this site, which is single-family residences.
Thank you. Yeah, the key there is, does it rise to the level of the need for, based on the significance for our ask of the applicant for a further environmental review? And the way that we've characterized, and I'm reading here directly from the draft, the point consistency with community plans and community character, the proposed action is not inconsistent with adopted community plans and community character. And further to that, the proposed action is generally consistent with the comprehensive plan and city zoning code and will not have significant impact on municipal services and is consistent with the character of the existing neighborhood. From basically our understanding of how these lots are being proposed, their size, their orientation, their access. It goes on to say the proposed lots comply with the minimum lot sizes for the respective zoning districts in which the lots are located. Again, does not rise to the level of a significance such that we would need to call for further detailed study. And then further, fire truck access diagrams were reviewed by the planning board. We just saw updated ones tonight, to confirm fire and emergency access to each of the proposed lots. The proposed development is consistent with the prevailing development patterns for the area surrounding the property. So that's how we're characterizing for SECRA with this draft negative declaration. And there are other very detailed, we can review some of those as well, provisions of this draft neg deck that relate directly to a lot of these issues, and whether or not, again, we've heard a lot from the community, yes, however, they have to rise to a certain level of significance before they trigger further in-depth review by the applicant. In this case, we're stating through our draft of the neg deck, and certainly let's talk about it, that this is consistent with community plans and community character. I mean, we can even, go to another item that has been raised a number of times by the public of, obviously certain import and concern, and that has to do with impact on transportation. The proposed action will not, and we're stating through this draft neg deck, will not have a significant adverse environmental impact on transportation. Thusly, the construction of 4 new single-family homes will not result in a significant adverse traffic impact based on the Institute of Transportation Engineers. The project would generate 5 vehicle trips in the AM peak hour and 5 to 6 trips in the PM peak hour. Generally, a project generating fewer than 100 trips in a peak hour is not considered to be a significant increase in traffic. Furthermore, a City of Beacon ladder truck, again, addressing emergency access, a City of Beacon ladder truck tracking template exhibit submitted by the applicant demonstrates that the ladder truck can enter and exit the shared driveway while vehicles are parked on the east side of Highland Place.
Can I just ask a question on that one
Yeah.
specific point? Does that require putting up no parking signs on the west side of the street?
I think if the city is going to, and let's talk about this, because I think obviously parking on both sides of the streets is constricting, right?
Yeah, it would be constricting for emergency vehicles. And the public has raised that concern before about vehicles being parked on both sides and their concerns with emergency vehicles getting up the road. And that's prior to the project even being constructed. So it may be something you wish to consider having the Traffic Safety Committee also review, since you're already asking them to look at other aspects.
Yes, so we've already made the recommendation and acted on that. Do we need to sort of codify the fact that we would like them also to look at parking and no parking on one or other side, one or the other side of the street?
The more specific, the better.
Yeah, I would recommend just adding that to your request
Yeah,
for the
so,
traffic
so
committee.
motion to amend our recommendation to the Traffic and Safety Committee to not only study, sorry, what was the first one we were going to ask you to study?
Traffic calming.
Traffic calming.
Yes, traffic calming, thank you. In addition to that, we will request that the Traffic and Safety Committee study parking and the potential for no parking on one side of the street.
Mm-hmm.
Motion.
So,
Question?
yes.
If we can add something to that, and that they,
Yeah, let's keep the motion open if there's anything else we want to pull into this.
all right, I think it might be worthwhile for them to examine whether, what the differential impacts are of a 5-home development or a 4-home development. Do you see what I'm saying? Compare the impacts of those two.
Are you asking the Traffic and Safety Committee to study that?
Yes.
That's not their job.
I don't, yeah.
They're not set up to do that.
It just studies the impact of this.
Traffic and safety.
No, it considers traffic and safety changes to the public right-of-way, not the impacts of development.
You would ask that request of the applicant if
We
you
can
wanted to
provide
have, show a comparison.
They
But
would
that
not
would
show
be-
any meaningful difference, but we can certainly provide that.
And the seeker, that doesn't necessarily have to impact the seeker determination at this time, because you're making a seeker determination based on the maximum 5 houses this is what traffic would be at its max. So you can still ask for additional information about, okay, well, what would it be at 4? And you don't have to keep seeker open if you'd like to move forward tonight. Again, after this decision, there's going to be another public hearing, and you continue your review process focused on the subdivision specifically.
Could I ask a question about that
Yes.
in particular? Could you just discuss a little bit the scaffolding of one decision and then how that impacts? Like if there's a negative declaration declared on the SECRA review, are there, that allows still for the possibility of a hypothetical denial of a subdivision approval based on other concerns?
Yes.
Right, exactly. And you'd focus that denial specifically on provisions in the city code pertaining to the subdivision factors and what has to go into subdividing the property, and you deny it on design factors and things separate and apart from seeker, and that is a possibility.
And if there were significant changes, if I may, if there were significant changes to the application, for example, that changed the design or other features, the board can also revisit seeker if that were appropriate. I mean, other projects might be of larger scale where that would be more relevant. The Edgewater project, for example, was approved from a seeker perspective for over 300 units. When it was reduced to 200 and some odd units, it had to come back before the board. I mean, it would stand to reason that it was a reduced impact, but that had to be reevaluated because that's a substantial change from what was originally considered.
And that's a way different scale than what we're dealing with here, but it is a possibility, and we can walk through any potential changes to the plans and whether or not reevaluation of seeker would be appropriate. But again, just because you make a seeker determination at this stage or tonight, it does not preclude from reopening and from changing the plans in the future.
Thanks.
If I may.
Yeah.
I think it would probably be accurate to perhaps look at this from the perspective of if the legislature had not adopted the State Environmental Quality Review Act in the first place, asking us to make an assessment of whether this proposed action is likely to have a significant negative environmental impact. I think all of the considerations we've heard tonight would still be in front of us.
Dave, he just can't hear you in the microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I can hear you really well.
Well, but just that SECRA is a specific question. It's not approval of the project.
That's right. Yes. Well said. Okay. Anyone else from the public?
John, regarding traffic.
Thank you.
What you could ask of the applicant is to understand the impact. While I agree with the criteria set forth by seeker about the number of trips that are an impact, the impact to the community, they could collect traffic volumes on Grove Street and see how the increase in traffic would compare to that street in particular, since it needs to look at the local aspect. So it's not a full traffic study, but
I mean, with all due respect, I mean, to the traffic consultant, I don't know what the numbers are. You, as a consultant reviewing it, you would see the numbers are below 100 trips.
I agree. I agree, but I think the board is trying to get some clarity on what is the impact. I mean,
We could clarify that in just the numbers that would be generated by each home. So if we reduced it by one home, the number of vehicles would, generally speaking, correlate to that one development. So instead of 5 trips, you're at 4. Or instead of 6, you're at 5. I mean, it's a pretty straightforward. Sorry to interrupt. I just mean that exercise is not going to provide any meaningful determination as to whether there's a significant adverse environmental impact.
As it relates to SECRA, agreed.
It would quantify what the impact is, the differential impact, and whether it's small or large. That's not for us to determine right now.
I think the seeker has set forth a quantitative number for the impact. I mean, you can act on that, but I'm just trying to find a way to show the community that the number of trips being generated by this site are not, are not impactful to the trips currently on the roadway, or the volumes currently on the roadway.
So you're saying, okay, right. So on its face, this particular application and the number of trips and the in relationship to the threshold, 100 trips or anything lower than that, does not rise to the level of significant adverse impact. I think that's all clear. So I think what I'm hearing then also is there some understanding of these 5 homes and their traffic, or at least the 4 new additional traffic trips, in context of other developments within the city, or at least relative to this area in aggregate? Is that kind of what I'm hearing? Is that something that we should be concerned about, or would that rise to the level of impact? I just intuitively, no, but I'm just curious, both Kevin and Stark, help me understand how a deeper study, especially with one house removed, might help an understanding in relationship to the threshold of significant adverse impact.
I just wanted to get a sense if there was a study being done of not just the proposal that's being put forward, but alternates that might reduce its impact. That was the intent of having an analysis of what the, as you said, one house would be 1/5 of whatever the impact is. Maybe that's
Understood.
the
And
analysis.
if I may, a house, I think one member of the public mentioned in their comment letter to the board that I have 5 cars that park at my house. One house might have 1 car. It's all factored in. There's no set number. You don't know exactly how many people. You don't know how few or as many. I mean, these are all the intangibles that could open Pandora's box in any application period, but the what's being proposed is not presenting a significant adverse environmental impact to the community character, to the character of the neighborhood, to the overall network of operations for traffic circulation in the city of Beacon. It's not affecting. I think when
I'll
we
come back to it and say my professional opinion is that this will not have a significant adverse impact. But if the board wanted to have quantitative data about how the number of trips are going to be compared to the trips that are on the roadways now, you could ask that. But
Yeah. Oh, I understand.
Our professional opinion is that this will not have a significant adverse impact on the roadway with 5 single-family homes. That would just be the tool.
So the idea would be to put it in context, right, of what's happening currently, and to understand that incremental increase. Sorry, did you have something, John?
Just to recognize it is an incremental increase, because what we're talking about here is, if this was our 110,
Yeah.
A lot of people would have said that would be a fair thing. Instead of splitting the parcel, make it all war 110. There'd be 4 houses on the parcel, in the subdivision, and that would be legal. You'd have 1 less driveway and one less house. Is that a significant impact over the desirable thing that people have talked about?
Right. No.
It's not.
Yes,
It's
right.
not you can't ask an applicant to do a environmental impact statement, which is the alternative that would be considered, over 1 or at most 2 houses.
Understood.
May I make a comment, Jack?
Yes, you may. You may be heard.
Thank you. So I understand that, and I agree that technically the application probably qualifies for a neg deck. I just keep coming back to that one line in about the character of the neighborhood. Where is it?
Very bottom, the last bullet.
Right. That it will not have a significant impact, or that it is consistent with the character of the existing neighborhood. And what I'd like to say about that is that character is ineffable. And we're hearing from all the people who live around there that they're the ones that create the character of the neighborhood. And they're saying, yeah, it is going to change it. So I understand, fine, neg deck. Going forward, I would hope that there's something that we can do to enhance the existing character of the neighborhood with this application and request of the applicant that he be amenable to at least listening to that. There's a lot that can be done with the design, I believe. So,
If I may, I might address some of that. We did incorporate a lot of mitigation measures into the program. It's not just houses, build them, see you later. It's incorporating landscaping design along the frontages. We've incorporated tree-lined driveways, which is a recommendation of your planner. We incorporated those sidewalk or the private walkways, as the chair mentioned before. That's common from the public. This has been a revised application to reduce impervious surfaces that are there, so all these factors are not taken in a vacuum. So when the public makes comments with respect to an application, the intent is hopefully to get other information that the board might not have been aware of in its deliberations or to add to the board's deliberations. The board has certainly highlighted those, and so have your consultants, in their memoranda, which the applicant has then put into their program. The landscaping and all the screening, Mr. Russo also mentioned additional buffering for the existing residents, which we're agreeable to. So those are ways that we're addressing the potential for community character impact. Those are mitigation measures. So where there are mitigation measures incorporated, the idea there is to reduce any potentially significant adverse, that's the two key words, significant adverse environmental impacts. With respect to what we're proposing is zoning compliant, single-family residences in a single-family residential zoning district, totally consistent with the area. We've looked at other lots of similarly situated sizes. They have adequate frontage, firematic access, and additional screening. So with respect to community character, we've tried to mitigate that or manage that through those other implementations. It's not purely.
And I think what you're hearing from the neighborhood is that it's not enough.
Understood, and we're trying to be responsive through it, but to say that to 5 or 4 is the driving factor, those aren't, the changes or the impacts that are reflected into the community are not those that would rise to that level of a significant adverse impact. There may be an impact. It's not saying that a project can't have.
On paper, but.
Well, through all of our studies and reports, we've managed the stormwater, we've managed access to the site, we've created frontages, we're zoning compliant. So we're conforming with all of the code requirements. So I appreciate the comments. I just wanted to highlight that we did have mitigated potential impacts associated with what you've highlighted, Ms. Reynolds.
Great. We still have an open motion on the table about our recommendation to the Traffic and Safety Committee. So we had asked that they look at on-street parking and traffic calming measures. Anything else we want to add to that before we?
I would look at stop signs. There's no stop sign on Highland. They could slow down traffic on Grove by putting a stop sign at the top of the hill.
Great.
Not coming up the hill, but before you get to the hill. That would be a way of calming traffic. The roads in that area are already narrow. It's going to be hard to narrow them as a strategy for traffic calming. You can tree line them, which visually slows people down. There's hardly any street trees in that, on Grove Street particularly.
Yep.
That would be another way, but that's sort of a design thing. The traffic and safety would look at stop signs and no parking.
Yep.
Those are the two items that I would draw attention to.
So as opposed to the broader term traffic calming, specifically stop signs.
Well, they could
Right.
think about it in terms of traffic calming,
Yeah, I
but
understand.
it's a difficult, there's no reason for people to drive fast on those streets, but they do.
Yeah, people drive fast on all the streets in Bacon. I don't know what the heck is in the water. Anyway, so you're
And
clear
it's
on
not
your-
like they're built like superhighways.
even though people drive like they are. Are you clear on the charge in terms of the motion we have open? So great. So,
And I think that in the context, it would be, they would look at these items regardless of whether the subdivision went in, because there are already issues: speeding, no stop signs, parking on both sides of the street that's only 22 feet wide. That's not acceptable.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, you need at least, say, 27 feet to have parking on both sides. And even that's a yield street where you don't have through traffic coming through.
So let's say the charge we're asking of the Traffic and Safety Committee is to look at traffic calming and specifically stop signs, as well as on-street parking.
And I would say specifically on the west side of Highland Place.
On the west side of Highland Place. So I think we had the motion by Karen. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Jill. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And then want to give the public any additional opportunity. Please, Mr. Pavlok.
Dennis Pavlok, Justin Street. I just have a general question. If this board has setback standards and they can be adjusted and compromised, why have setback standards at all? That was my comment. Thank you for your time.
I think I can answer that question. They were adjusted as a part of the city's reassessment of certain zoning parcels.
In fact, the board actually has more latitude with subdivisions to be flexible with unduly restrictive conditions on a subdivision. We're not seeking any type of relief, but.
Correct. And yes, there are certain instances, as John described, again, this is in response and for the record, I don't know why he ran off, where we do have some leeway around setbacks and compliance with them, but for the most part, that's one of the first things we look at. You're in compliance with your setbacks,
right.
We're good. Okay, anyone else from the public? Come on up.
I'm sorry, thank you very much for allowing it. My biggest issue from the beginning has been parking on Highland and parking in front of my house. And one of the reasons that the public hearing wasn't closed the last time we had this public hearing was because of the concern with the potential for no parking in order for the fire truck access. So now it's just accepted, oh, okay, we'll just have no parking on the west side of Main Street. So you're doubling the amount of houses and completely removing parking from an entire side of the street. How is that not a significant impact? That's cutting our parking by like a quarter now. That will completely destroy the quality of life in our neighborhood if you do that. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity.
Sure. Is that something you wanted to address?
I think I'll only able to address your consultants have already addressed it. It's an existing condition that's the problem, not the proposed action. So it's just something that may have already been something that should have been adjusted previously, but the committee is going to look at whether or not that's something that should take place. So I think it's an existing condition. It's not being created by the application.
Yep.
Well, the need for the parking is being created by the application.
No.
No.
Right. The west side on our, yeah, go ahead, Mr. Chairman. Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, look, as far as the access to the site, it's generally similar to what's existing currently.
Correct.
Right? We're adding, for the most part, we're widening a curb cut, and
Yes.
we're adding another one to the north. The ability for fire equipment to service the house now on that lot is still the same type of situation. Should there be parking on both sides of that street, it's still
Correct.
restricted.
Correct.
So that's the point that the applicant is making. So it's an existing issue already. Great. Anyone else from the public? So to that end, we can entertain a motion to close the SECRA public hearing with the understanding that we will also discuss at some point opening the site plan public hearing.
Subdivision.
Subdivision, thank you. Can I have a motion to close the SECRA public hearing?
Motion.
Motion by Karen.
Second.
Second by Jill. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And then, as mentioned, we do have the draft neg deck, and we can review any other provisions if the board has questions or want further elucidation on any of the components of this, but we read specifically from a few relative to the negative declarations position regarding significant adverse impacts. Any questions or a motion to adopt?
I'm sorry, what is this?
We have the draft negative declaration that we are able to act on tonight if we so choose. So I'm asking for a motion.
That's what I just made a motion.
No, that was to close the secret public hearing.
Isn't it the same thing?
No.
I'm sorry.
Step by step.
Multiple steps.
So it's the same, but I mean, by
No, so-
closing this, by closing the hearing.
It doesn't automatically mean we've adopted the negative declaration. We have to do that in a separate motion.
Okay, motion.
So motion by Jill,
Second.
second by Karen, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. Are you aye?
No,
Why?
because I think there's a significant impact.
Okay, please clarify.
I think the discussion has been gone on for quite a bit, but I think that.
I need specifics, Kevin. Why do you feel specifically that there are significant adverse impacts? That's the question.
I think there's a significant impact to the community character.
Okay. And so you're going to vote no? Or are you abstaining?
I'm voting no.
Okay. So recorded?
Just for the record, there's 4 ayes, 1 nay.
Correct.
Right.
Thank you. Therefore, it passes. Okay, anything else?
Just if the board sees fit to reset or
renotice?
Reset, we have to renotice in the paper, the signage and in the mailings.
Yes, so motion to schedule subdivision public hearing for next month's meeting. I'll accept the motion.
Motion.
Motion by Karen.
Second.
Second by Jill. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to call for a quick 1-minute break, and then we'll get back to the regular agenda. Thank you. No. So, great. Hi. Next item on the agenda is
Sorry, I almost forgot my intro.
the continued review of an application for concept plan approval. We're in concept plan approval for the Beacon Hip Lofts Studios, Front Street, submitted by Beacon Hip Lofts LLC, referred to the planning board by City Council.
Sure, so the applicant's proposing to construct a multi-use building with a total of 30,000 square feet of first-floor artisan studios and 28 loft apartments on the second floor. The proposed project is on a 3.5-acre undeveloped parcel in the Fishkill Creek Development District and within the Historic District and Landmark Overlay Zone. An existing greenway trail is also on the parcel. This action is an unlisted seeker action, and a project in the Fishkill Creek District requires City Council approval of the concept plan. The City Council has referred the plans to the Planning Board for a seeker review and report and recommendation on the concept plan specifically. After concept plan approval by the council, more specific architectural, landscaping, lighting, and engineering details should be covered by the planning board during the subsequent site plan and architectural review board approval process. The planning board is currently gathering information to make a determination under seeker. Then you'll prepare that report and recommendation, goes back to the planning board, goes back to the city council, and then back to the planning board.
Yep.
So this is the very beginning of quite a long process
Right,
for
so
property in this district.
A bit of a bouncing ball. You first went to the council, shared your thoughts with them. They said, hey, go talk to the planning board.
Right.
You were here with us 2 months ago,
Mhm.
and now you're back. We're continuing the review of your concept plan. And again, as Drew mentioned, we have to review for SECRA before then we refer it back to the city council.
Right.
At which point, you'll go back to the city council and then come back to us.
Right, for the actual technical site plan review.
Right. So,
Yep. So,
proceed.
I'm R.E.A. Siegel, representing the owner. I'm here with Mike Bodendorf, the site civil engineer for the project. So we submitted revised drawings and other documentation in response to the comments we received at the last meeting. There was a architectural report, traffic report, archaeological report, and we also submitted additional information on the landscape design. So basically, the archaeological report didn't pick up anything significant. With the traffic report, we're trying to see if we could reduce the number of constructed parking spaces by, by land banking a number of them. And to do that, we're gonna, the traffic engineer's gonna do some research on, what's happening on the developed site adjacent to this site, to see if there's a possibility of shared parking. And what he plans to do is do some observation of
actual conditions, as opposed to, there was an idea maybe we would speak to the residents, but after talking about it, he thinks that just observation of sort of a day-to-day parking, operation may be a better way to go. So,
I have one question to that,
Mhm.
Ari, just sorry to interrupt, but do we know, thank you, John. Do we know that all the units and facilities in the neighboring property are occupied? It's fully occupied, or do we have vacant units?
They're
That, if they
yeah.
come occupied, now you're gonna have additional cars coming in that weren't accounted for.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I know, it's pretty much 100% occupied, except for the new building that's going up right now.
Can I have a question? How many units are going in that new building?
In the new building?
Yeah, the one that's under construction.
It's 89.
The one currently under construction, that's the
Right.
question. Yeah, okay.
On the developed property, yeah.
Yep.
How many
Okay.
are proposed here?
I'm getting that.
28.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, sorry, I should read.
And so right now, we have all the parking we need for the, the residential and the commercial, but, ideally, if there's some way to do it, I think everyone would like to reduce that, or at least what's constructed.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's good to hear. So if there's if there's an avenue for that, then, we're certainly open to talking about it. I know, so just before, so since we last talked with you, you showed us a very early concept plan. In terms of between then and now, anything significant as far as the development of this plan and the concept that you want to share with us?
We didn't make changes to the footprint of the building or the general idea of the building, but we filled in some information that, John and John had asked for. And then there's also the development of the landscape plan. There's a lot more engineering now, which Mike can talk about. And also, just so you're aware, the property owner of this property repaved Mill Street up to the railroad tracks. So that has been improved already. I know that was a concern.
When did that happen?
Maybe a month and a half ago.
So it was before the new year?
Yeah.
I was just over there after the new year. I didn't notice.
Yeah, it was awful before that, but it's vastly improved.
Okay. Okay. Then we do have the benefit of, obviously, our planner, engineers, and traffic consultants' reviews. So let's just do the round robin, typical order. Mr. Clark.
Okay, just a reminder, this is a concept plan, and so they don't have to do architecture, final landscaping, any of that sort of thing. That's when they come back to the planning board after concept plan approval. You don't want to give the council too much work. It's designed to be a concept, not a, they're not supposed to be dealing with engineering or architecture and landscaping and details. They did do a development analysis. I asked them to do that because there are certain deductions in this parcel that they have to take for floodways and standing water and things like that. They did that. What I saw, it's approved at 28 units. So they are allowed to do the number that they are showing. One of my major complaints was the sidewalk issue, which is talked about in the concept plan. That a pedestrian circulation system should be as part of the concept plan. And, right now, what I see, the sidewalk just encircles the building with no setback between the building and the sidewalk, which is generally better practice for drainage purposes and that sort of thing. There's no connection between the sidewalk and the Greenway Trail, even though they're only 5 feet apart. Yep. There's no sidewalk connection up to Mill Street, which I think is something that should be looked at and considered, since this is part of their property, goes up to Mill Street, or the Mill Front Street intersection. So that pedestrian circulation system is important that they have to take care of. And then the other major comment was over the traffic impact study, and particularly the parking count. They provide 95 spaces, which is required by code, but there are provisions in the code that you can reduce that number for shared parking based on hours. They did an hours analysis, but it was based on ITE categories that don't really match up that well. So I suggested that they also consider looking at the adjacent site where they do have artists, live-work type units, and interview and find out how many of those people might want to have studio space here, so that you could deduct those sorts of numbers. If 20% of the people say that they might be interested in studio space, they wouldn't have to have a separate parking space right next door.
So somewhat of a
And they would have an
simultaneous use.
indication of how many people who might live on the second floor might be interested in having a studio space on the first floor, and you don't need redundant parking for that. So I would like to see the parking count come down. They proposed 15 spaces. That still seems high. The 95 to 15 is still 80 spaces for this building.
You're saying you're looking for, if I'm reading you and hearing you correctly, you're looking for a greater space reduction.
Yes.
Yeah, and obviously the intent is
Or at least
to-
ammunition to determine whether that's viable.
Yeah, got it.
And then the planning board can land bank spaces. If you're not confident in those numbers, or if those numbers seem speculative, you can always land bank the parking and look at it in 6 months and determine whether those extra 20, 25 spaces are necessary, whatever.
Yep.
So I would be less conservative on the deduction that they would get for having shared parking of mixed use that may have some overlap in terms of hours, and also the tenant use of the property down below.
Yeah, understood. So I'm curious, when it comes to land banking and that potential number, how do we eventually get to that, if that's something we're going to?
Yeah, well, they did it, like I said, in ITE, which are in many ways flawed ITE parking numbers, because they're based on suburban examples primarily, and they're sometimes based on very limited number of samples to project all over the country. So I think an analysis based on the existing conditions next door would be helpful.
Yeah.
And a certain number of tenant interviews to find out what sort of percentage they could project of people who live in the building or live next door in the building might be interested in renting those studio spaces on the ground floor, so that you could deduct those parking spaces.
Would there be any wisdom in, as far as land banking, defaulting to a number of total required, meaning, between paved and land banked, the
Right.
ultimate end result is the potential,
Yeah, that they could fully build out the 95 if
Right, the
necessary.
potential for a full build-out, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's one way to look at it.
That's I think you could, depending how the numbers work out in the long-term analysis, you could say, okay, instead of 95, we think because of shared parking, you're going to definitely have some shared parking overlap or non-overlap of hours between the commercial use and the residential use, that you could deduct it down to, say, I think, 80, and then consider a factor beyond that for shared use of tenants
Yeah.
of the rental space, and land bank that, for instance. But it depends on how you come out with what numbers you feel comfortable with and the board feel comfortable with, in terms of making sure in the long run you have enough parking, but you don't overpark
Yeah.
to begin with.
Okay, so you're clear on how to initiate
Yeah,
that
that clarified.
sort of analysis, okay.
What you're asking for, so,
Great.
yeah.
Anything else?
That's it.
Yeah, great. Mr. Russo.
So if the board remembers, this property, a third of it is located within the floodway.
Yeah.
And the remainder of it, or 99% of it or so, is located within the floodplain.
That's the 100-year.
That's a 100-year. And then there's a little zone beyond that X zone, but it's within the 100-year. So basically, as the project progresses, the applicant will need to seek a flood development permit from the city. They'll probably do that time of building permit. they have to set their floor elevations based upon flood elevations that have been established by FEMA. City code requires that those floor elevations be 2 foot above flood elevations. They have done that. With the concern of inundation of the site with water, I've asked the applicant to look into that. Their engineer did, and they did find documentation from FEMA that specifically says that that fringe area, which is the area between the floodway and then 100-year flood line, is called the fringe, can be completely, how do they say it? The floodway fringe encompasses the portion of floodway that can be completely obstructed without increasing the water surface elevation of the 1% annual chance flood, which is 100-year, by more than 1 foot at any point. That does comply with the city's code, so I can't ask them to review that further. If the city code was more stringent and said you can't increase the water by 0, 1 inch, 2 inches, we could make them study that.
Yep.
Just, John, if I may, for a visual, for what John's explaining right now, we put that up on the screen. So what you have is this line would represent the floodway line over the course of a stream channel. So you have each side that encompasses also a floodplain line. So these outer lines represent where the floodplain line would end up. What's in between the floodway and the floodplain is the floodway fringe. So what FEMA says is you can fill this as much as you want so long as you don't fill inside the floodway lines, and you won't result in increasing the floodplain elevation by more than 1 feet. And I'll just add to that discussion that we're only filling one side of the stream, so there still is that floodway fringe or floodplain fringe, or it is the floodway fringe, on the opposite side of the stream that's not being touched by this project.
When you say fill, and I'm assuming fill means those hatched areas, and that's fill through grading.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there a floodway on the other side? I thought the steep was,
It's rather
banks were pretty steep there.
Yeah, there's a floodway on both sides of the stream.
Okay.
And I think the floodplain line is much closer to the floodway on the opposite side because those banks are much steeper and higher. This side is lower than the east side.
So what everything I'm hearing is that what you're proposing is in compliance with the city's code and wouldn't significantly impact what you're sharing with us as far as your concept plan.
Correct, and it's in compliance with the FEMA. This is a FEMA standard that we're looking at right here.
Correct. So basically, we had to look at that as part of seeker as we're going through this and the impacts.
No
being in a
significant
floodplain.
adverse environmental
So there's no
impact at this point. Okay.
So the building itself is in the fringe?
The building itself is in the fringe.
Yes.
And isn't that considered filling more than 1 foot? Like the volume of the
No, the water
building?
level itself can't raise more than 1 foot. So it's
Okay.
not that.
You're obstructing 1
You
foot?
can, right, you can obstruct the fringe outside the floodway, but doing so will not raise the water level by more than 1 foot in the floodway. That's what FEMA states in their studies.
In the age of climate change, if I was developing this building, I know it's not my money, I would do more than 2 feet above the, but 2 feet meets the code.
I don't disagree with you, John. I would always look
Yeah.
to do more, but 2 feet meets the code,
'Cause,
meets
you know,
FEMA's
the
code.
100-year floodplain these days is flooded every,
I know,
you know,
a
8
100-year
weeks, it
storm
seems.
event
Yeah.
occurs
Even
every
on-
other month.
Even on the Fishkill Creek?
Yeah, actually, we experienced several floods. Irene, Sandy was not that bad up here, but there was another flood. This happens
Just-
on the creek
Just
all
a
the
few
time.
Just for reference to Irene and Lee, that area, the flood, or the water barely came in to that part of the parcel.
I was there for Irene, and I saw significant flooding in this place before it had gotten.
During Irene or
previous
Lee?
owner- The previous owner was complaining about the adjacent development and its stormwater management that was dumping onto the adjacent site. This is just something I experienced.
Were either of those storms classified to the level of 100-year?
Yes and no.
No, separately, combined, yes.
Yeah, depending on where you were, the intensity of the storm was much greater in terms of how long it lasted and how much rain fell. So in a way, you could almost say that's more than a 100-year storm, because a 100-year storm is a 24-hour storm where I believe it was Lee that dropped more rain than Irene, and that's where the serious flooding happened, for the most part. I mean, Irene did its damage as well. But I went to all the sites on the Fishkill Creek periodically during that whole time, and I didn't see any breaches. I actually saw worse flooding during Hurricane Ida.
That's kind of cool.
Not in the creek, but in like storm systems and things like that.
During big storms, you geek out and you go run around. That's kind of cool.
I want to know what's happening. I want to make sure what I'm designing is actually happening.
He doesn't want to get a call from me that there's a problem on the site.
Interesting. Hey, I learned something new. Okay, thanks.
Storm chaser.
Yeah.
Some other things that they're still gathering data on, as we had asked for reports on the existing sanitary sewer pump station that services these sites. So they're gathering data on that. They still need to provide a report on that. We've asked them to consult with the building department, the fire department, as far as emergency access concerns. We want to make sure what's being laid out, even conceptual-wise, is going to work as far as access. I'm asking for more information to be shown on the plans with regards to Front Street as it extends to the south beyond the existing building. The plans just seem to go blank. And I do have concerns.
Ari, I fell asleep at it. It was table.
I do have concerns with regards to the residential building that's there and the cars that all park perpendicular to Front Street, narrowing Front Street itself in that area. And they're noting that that southern entrance will be an emergency access, a secondary access, if the main one is blocked off. My concern is if the main one is blocked off, you're basically going to be using that southern access, and you're going to need two-way traffic to get through there. Then with regards to the stormwater, that's still got to be reviewed. The SWIP joint inspection will have to be done for the infiltration systems that they're proposing. So as that progresses, I'll provide more information on that. And then there's a number of other comments I've asked their engineer to take a look at as far as grading utilities.
Great. Okay. So as far as SECRA and their building their...
So basically, we need more information on the sewer, emergency access, the stormwater to make sure what they're proposing will comply.
So you've got work to do. And then we'll get to the good part, traffic.
Yeah, so we looked at the site plan and the traffic study. As far as our site plan comments go, we recognized that there was 2 parking spaces adjacent to the Greenway Trail crossing, if those could be relocated to increase visibility, and that possibly the crosswalk be a raised crosswalk, if that could be considered.
Sorry, which location?
So where the Greenway crosses over through the parking lot, it's right now it's a
over here.
They are kind of delineating it with that change in material, but if it could be a raised crosswalk, that'd be preferred, just to kind of bring pedestrians up. And then also the 2 parking spaces, if you are going to land bank spaces or if you're going to reduce the number of parking spaces, if you could start there to, again, increase visibility for pedestrians. We would recommend that turning tip will be provided for the traction closure being accessed. Sidewalks were brought up, the sidewalk connectivity, at least connecting to the sidewalks that are on Mill Street right now. We had some questions about how parking would operate. Would the parking be delineated or signed for residents, or would it just be unsigned? would you be providing any electric vehicle parking spaces? That was the extent of our our site plan comments. As for the traffic impact and parking study, we did note that the study uses the correct land use codes. In fact, the land use code that they use for the commercial use is pretty conservative, given that it's going to be an artist's studio and not a retail space. So that does provide a conservative analysis. They take into account other developments in the area. The number of parking spaces does meet the code requirements. They do look at the potential of the self-storage that's going to be proposed on the other site. I think just notably the intersection of Mill Street and 52 right now is unsignalized. Well, it's signalized, but it's not signalized.
There's no
two-way stop control with flashing yellow and red.
Is there?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so the traffic study shows that as it stays in the unsignalized condition, there will be some level of service constraints on the Mill Street approach.
Nobody pays attention to that.
I'm taking it you're one of them.
No, what I mean is, again, this is the egress out onto 52.
Yeah. There's a blinking light there.
I never know. What my point is, though, that I feel like I wait there forever to get out of Hiblofts.
Oh, you still will.
Meaning the traffic on 52 doesn't seem to notice at all that there's some sort of traffic
they're beating
signal
yellow.
up there.
Well,
They're
it's
beating
just
yellow.
All they have to do is, they can keep going. It's just a heads up, there might be a car coming.
Yeah, that's what I mean. And they just keep going. They don't give a crap somebody's coming out of the Hiblofts.
It'll turn green eventually, John.
I might still be sitting there, yeah. So I'm just curious about how the signaling and whether, the trip generation might rise to the level of an improvement to signaling there.
So that intersection is proposed to be signalized as part of improvements that are being done, I believe, by the city.
Okay.
So.
Okay, and you're performing your analysis with that assumption?
They conducted an analysis with that assumption. We did note that they don't have, the signal timings haven't been distributed for that signal yet, so they assume a reasonable signal timing plan for it. But certainly the signalization helps with the operations of the intersection.
Okay, got it.
Could we recommend that they reach out to the design engineers for that project and see if they can ascertain that information from them?
So, yeah, we can ask that. In my experience with the DOT, they won't distribute it until they've installed it, but we can certainly ask that Colliers reach out to the DOT for the timing plans.
To bring it out of the more theoretical into more
bring it into
specific.
more
Yeah.
realistic.
Yeah, 'cause I mean, just in terms of the impact, I know this isn't as large as the building currently being built, but it's again, adding more
Right, you have
activity.
all the homes that are in there, the apartment
Yeah.
buildings, and all those buildings, that is their primary access in and out of that entire area.
Yep, great. Thank you, Mr. Hipp.
Yeah, not affiliated with the project.
I was going to say, it's a coincidence.
My name.
All right.
I just wanted to clarify one thing. When you say a raised crosswalk, you mean like a mountable curb kind of a idea?
Like a speed table, so.
Right,
Yeah,
okay.
so it could be, a 4-inch vertical element over 6 to 8 feet.
Oh, okay.
4 feet down, yeah.
Okay.
The same thing, REA, when you're raising that in that area, if those areas are gonna be land banked to either side, you may just wanna make a look, or extend an island out to encompass those three, like a grass island to, kind of give a visual that, the width is being reduced and possibly slow people down.
As far as the Greenway Trail, Has the Greenway Trail Committee weighed in at all? Is this on their radar?
Yeah, we at the beginning of the project, we met with Tom
Yeah.
and walked the site with him. So, and that's basically where we came up with that different material for the crosswalk. And we reviewed the improvement of the Greenway Trail near the building.
Okay.
You know, with the additional landscaping. So he's aware of it, and we tried to accommodate the comments that he gave us.
Great.
Have they seen the latest plans that you've?
No, we didn't send it to him directly because I think he also understands that's going to come up more in the site plan review.
Sure. Okay. Thank you, esteemed consultants. Any questions for the applicant around the board?
I was curious about one thing, whether or not there were any other agencies having jurisdiction that are going to need approval for development in the floodway. Let's say like the Corps of Engineers or the state. So we're the only authority that has.
We don't think we need any other permits. We're not proposing any outfalls into the Better Banks of the stream. I don't think we need any certifications from FEMA, so long as we meet their requirements.
I believe you will need to provide certifications for the city as part of the floodplain development permit. And the other agencies that would be involved would be Department of Health with regards to the water and sewer.
Right.
Any other thoughts, questions, open discussion?
Not at the moment.
I agree with John's assessment of the parking. It's too much parking.
Yeah, I think, any opportunity to land bank.
Yeah.
And, I think very
Especially in a
important.
floodplain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With your cars floating away. And then, this idea of connectivity, pedestrian connectivity, and it being logical and intuitive and convenient, I think is really important. It's a large complex back there, and it's really shaping up to being sort of a nice environment. So the ability to navigate on foot, I'm sure, is benefit to the residents and visitors. So some thought there is going to be well appreciated.
And just to clarify, in terms of the seeker items, it's that connectivity, the parking. Is there anything else on the planning end?
No, the parking and the the sidewalk connection.
Yeah.
All the rest of them, I think, have been covered. I was satisfied with the archaeological and the other information you provided.
Okay. Yeah, so we'll focus on that and on the engineering items that are affecting seeker.
Right. With regards to stormwater, Mike, if they do land banking on here, I would still size out the stormwater facilities so that when they get constructed, it's not something else that needs to be looked at that time. It'll be present for it.
So you
I
said,
would like to see the land banking happen at the entry point, not at the far end. Because, having coming in here, it would be nice if that was a landscaped area rather than a back out area.
Right.
and you said archaeology is done?
Yeah, they did the phase one, or whatever.
Phase 1A was done.
Nothing of historic significance?
No, they said that this was so worked over by all the factory mill sites in the beginning and that sort of thing. It's been jumbled enough that and it's been filled. There's been a lot of activity here over the years. I didn't think anything would be left.
I keep waiting for one of these applications to come up with something really good.
Just like that flashing red light.
We need a dummy light on the corner.
I would like to see that sidewalk moved away from the building so that it could be landscaped on both sides and have more of a naturalistic feel around the building rather than having it butt up against the building. That's my opinion.
Yeah. We have to make the building smaller. We're tight over there, but no, we'll look at that.
Okay, not maybe on all four sides, I understand, on the parking side and on maybe even the Greenway Trail side, unless you want to use the Greenway Trail as your pedestrian element on that side and link it up. That makes sense. Why have parallel sidewalks next to the Greenway Trail?
And then we could just connect to that,
Yeah.
Great.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Great, so we'll go to our next agenda item. Is this you too? Jeez.
Hello.
Leave some for the other attorneys.
For the record, would you like to lead it?
Yeah, so we're going to introduce, this is the continued review of application for site plan approval and subdivision, lot merger approval, for mixed-use commercial and residential. We got three addresses, 393 Fishkill, 397 Fishkill, and 7 Conklin Street. And this is your cue.
All right, the applicant is proposing to construct a 3-story mixed-use building in the general business district, including a 3,500 square feet of first-floor commercial space and 12 apartments. 3 adjoining lots will be with a combined 0.62 acres will be merged. Through the subdivision process, this action is an unlisted action. A notice of intent to be lead agency was circulated. No objections were received, and the planning board may declare itself lead agency at tonight's meeting.
So we'll do that first. Motion to declare planning board City of Beacon lead agency.
Motion.
Motion by Jill.
Second?
Second by Kevin. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great. And so we're under continued secret review. So yeah, why don't you just share with us where we're at?
Great.
As far as your progress, and we'll go from there.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, my name is Taylor T. Storms Palmer, with the law firm of Cuddy and Fader on behalf of the applicant. I am joined by REA Jim Cantori Siegel, our project architect, and our engineer Mike Storm Chaser Bodendorf, who continues to moonlight as Dan Kohler from Hudson Land Design. Our traffic consultant is Rich D'Andrea, who's not with us this evening, and then our landscape designer is Deborah Adamson. We're also joined by the applicant, Mr. Haug. As the chair stated, and as the planning board attorney mentioned, we are here before you for a subdivision or lot merger and site plan approval for the redevelopment of the property involving the 3 lots the chairman mentioned for a 3-story mixed-use commercial multifamily residential development. As was discussed at our December 13th meeting, the board did circulate its lead agency circulation, so again, we appreciate the board declaring itself lead agency this evening. Since that meeting, as detailed in our December 27th letter for members of the board that are joining us this evening, the applicant has received a response from the SHPO, finding that the project will not have any impact on historic or cultural resources, and we did also receive a response from DEC saying no objection to you serving, and then providing their general comments about projects in the area. As detailed, just for a quick update, in our site plan set, the building footprint was modified to provide 20-foot side yard setbacks on both sides of the building. It was an interesting, it's a very unique zoning district with respect to the corner lot. So that was adjusted. And they also maintained parking layout so it's ADA accessible. Then the proposed freestanding sign was relocated to the corner of Fishkill Avenue and Conklin to avoid conflict with the drainage system. The landscaping plan also includes a plant list now. And in our recent submission, we also included an I&I report, which I can have Mike speak to in a moment. But effectively, it says that there are no illicit connections to the existing system, and that a drainage report concluded that the addition of stormwater management would actually increase the peak runoff rate. So no stormwater management is proposed. Storm system management system is proposed here. We are coordinating currently, we haven't finished that process yet, with the building department to have an emergency services review similar to the first application that was before you this evening, firematic access if you may. For the February meeting, we will also be getting you building elevations, so you'll have the fuller picture of this. We wanted to make sure our project design was more set before providing any renderings to that effect. And while the comments from the city's traffic consultant were limited, we did incorporate responses into our cover letter to you all, but we will put them onto Collier's formal response to the comments for that. So with that, I don't know, Mike, if you want to quickly touch on, yeah, just a few notes, and then if Ms. Jensen has any questions with respect to the site plan, we can certainly lay that out more in detail.
So just to piggyback on Taylor's comments on the I&I study, we still have some more work to do on that. There was one building that we couldn't access yet legally. We do have that permission now, so we will continue that study and update that I&I report. As far as the stormwater management system, we are providing, he's calling the stormwater management system as something as we were providing detention or something like that. We are providing a stormwater management system that will be a series of catch basins, piping to convey stormwater into the DOT system. And there is certain DOT criteria that you have to meet for when you're tying into their system. And we found that by providing detention on the site actually exacerbated the DOT piping versus not providing any detention at all. So essentially what we're doing is we're beating the peak flow that's in the DOT system by getting our flow out quicker. So it's a weird situation, but it does happen sometimes.
Physics?
It's counterintuitive.
That makes no sense. Yeah. That's
And
odd.
similarly, a lot of the projects that we've done on the Fishkill Creek, and we're doing on the project that was just before you before, is we're meeting the stormwater requirements in terms of water quality, and I'm talking about the HIP project. You know, the Fishkill Creek is a large watershed. You know, it's going to peak a day later than most of these small watersheds within a city. So what we're doing there, similarly, is we're providing the treatment, we're providing the runoff reduction as part of a project that requires a SWIP. But we're getting that drainage out quicker than the peak flows occur at the Fishkill Creek at that point. So this is a much smaller scale version of that, but it's a similar.
So this is cool. How does this work? Meaning, you're going to have runoff into the DOT system coming from, say, further upstream.
Yeah.
And what you're saying is that rather than impede it through the system you described, you're going to get it out before that peak flow.
Correct.
Right. If
It sounds like tricky math to me.
If you detain it on site and then release it later, you're releasing it at the point that actual peak is coming from the
Got
other
it.
areas, so it increases it. So DOT, in their guidelines, basically states that if you do these studies and you show that you're going to increase the peak, they want you to release it before the peak.
I see.
They
So
don't
how do you
wanna
know when the
burn their
peak's
pipes.
going to happen? I mean, that's pretty
So
complex.
you're downstream enough, basically.
We're
that-
downstream
Yeah.
enough that it can be released out, and basically that section of Fishkill Creek is basically right there, connection at the Hudson, so. it's
Yeah, if there
not
was
that far.
only a small series of pipes like that went up maybe 50 feet up Route 52 that we are tying into, that wouldn't apply, because that peak would happen at the same time as our site. But
Is this
in
only
this
the
case,
case-
there's a much larger watershed in the system that we're tying into.
Is this only the case for smaller projects that you can do this?
No.
It's unique to this situation. It happens in other areas, but
And the-
all the parts have to be in place for that to be.
And the infiltration isn't as important as getting it off the site. Is the-
Well,
what it
one, it
sounds
would be
like.
difficult to infiltrate on the site, given the rock.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's.
So all
you
you're
have to
doing
look
is
site
you're
by site
detaining
basis, you know,
Okay.
rock, clay. But you could have it on larger sites where they could be looking, releasing to a fifth order stream. And more or less like the Hudson is a fifth order stream or river. Basically, you would be analyzing that and taking a look at when the peak actually comes on that. And based upon guidelines from DEC, they would ask you to release your peak off of your site before the river actually peaked out, because you create more of a flooding hazard.
Yeah, I mean, the root cause here is being right next to and barely above the level of a much larger watershed, right? I don't know, it didn't seem that complicated to me.
I've never heard of this before, and this whole idea of being able to anticipate the peak and getting in before it is just absolutely
Remember all the flooding we
new
had?
to me.
Remember everything that happened right before Christmas, and then you walked down to Fishkill Creek, and all the rain had stopped, but Fishkill Creek was up really high.
Yeah.
There's a delay, because everything's draining into it.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I get it. It all makes sense. It makes common sense. It's just I didn't know that you could predict for this stuff. It's cool.
Yeah, you don't really know the situation until you start running the numbers.
Yeah, math.
Yep. A lot of it, too.
I'm sure. Great. Thanks. Anything else?
Yeah, so basically, we reset the footprint of the building on the site plan, so we maintain the setbacks that we're required to have, so the plans will follow along and the building elevations can be developed now. The only thing I wanted to mention was we have that recreation area on the left side of the building.
Yep.
And Mike's office is still looking at the grading over there. There's probably going to be a retaining wall and some steps down to it from that upper level so that we can flatten that out and have that be a usable recreation space that can have those tables. And
This is to the south side?
yeah,
Yeah.
it's over here.
Yeah.
So is that going to be ADA accessible in any way, shape, or form for people?
It will be from the sidewalk, but, but basically it has to be stairs from the upper level on the uphill side.
Okay.
So we'll develop that.
Any other questions by the board?
That was mine.
Questions or observations?
There's work proposed for 52 in that area, right? Are sidewalks and
Yeah.
other things?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's part of, there was some discussion about.
They've been incorporating, I provided the plans that I have for that project to the consultant in the beginning of this.
Okay.
So that they can incorporate what is going to be occurring, and that's why we also have requested that they look at installing their utilities on Conklin Street, because once Fishkill Avenue is done,
They ain't going back in.
they ain't going back in.
Right.
Unless they get in there prior to the project, it's not gonna happen.
I did see that. Have you been able to confirm that the water and sewer lines on Conklin are gonna be sufficient to accommodate that?
They will be.
Okay.
There's actually, I believe it's a 12 or 14. I've asked them to confirm, but there is a 12-inch minimum on Conklin Street as far as water goes that actually services the Rombout Water District in the town of Fishkill. So it runs through there, through the state prison facility, all the way over.
And we did confirm that it's a 14-inch
It is a
ductile
14.
coming down Conklin.
Okay.
Great.
I had one other point that didn't make it in my letter. I forgot to put it in. 52 is pretty barren when it comes to street trees. And this is the first opportunity to really start to change that pattern as new development happens down 52 to put in street trees. Now, the way they're setting the sidewalk so close to the curb line, you're not going to get trees between the sidewalk and the curb. So what I'm going to ask is that you put in street trees as close to the sidewalk as possible on a regular basis. She has a couple oak trees out front and a couple oak trees by the parking lot, one more oak tree on Conklin, and moving all of them up to the front as close to the sidewalk as manageable would start to create a sense of street trees along this project frontage.
As opposed to trying to get them into the city side.
Yeah, it's only
Right.
like 2.5, 3 feet.
Yeah.
You're not going to get street trees along the state highway at the curb line, unfortunately, I think.
Okay.
Those plans are already set. So unless there's 5 feet or so, I think you're going to have to put them on the inside of the sidewalk, but I would just pull them up close to the property line and put them at a regular interval, so they're, 30, 40 feet apart or so
Okay.
on both Conklin and 52.
I had a question about the impact on the utilities on Conklin. Is that going to be, can they accommodate that? Is that, that townhouse development is going in back there? Is that?
Oh, Beacon Views
Beacon Views.
is what you're talking about. Yes.
Yeah,
I can accommodate
can
that.
all- It can accommodate all that, okay.
Yes. Some of the other comments I had, they did do some excavation pits on the site to see where depth to rock was. I am asking that they do an additional one in the parking lot behind the one building there, which would put it into the portion of the two-story building. And then I'm asking them to take a harder look at the landscaping as we have trees directly on top of the retaining wall and impacting some other utilities. So they're going to have to revise their landscaping plan. And then the rest of it is just cleanup items as they develop the plans further.
Great, thanks.
As soon as we could get the building elevations, we could schedule an architectural review
Architectural
subcommittee.
review, yeah.
So
Great.
that would be helpful.
Yeah, maybe sit on the architectural review, just by way, thank you, John, for taking, that was my bold point. So just for the ARB subcommittee purposes, REA is finishing those elevations, so we're trying to figure out, in past instances with Mr. Buckley or Mr. Dexter, we would schedule a meeting through the building inspector, and then that would be how it would be on a Friday, typically, associated with planning board meetings. So just want to make sure, I know we've done a lot of helpful organization as far as that. Is that still the process with the ARB? Because REA is going to have that ready for the submission, and we'd hope to maybe make a request that we might be able to meet between the January 30th effective deadline and the 15th meeting. So we won't be together on Valentine's Day, I'm sorry. It's been put to a Wednesday, the 15th. But, well, REA was going to be my Valentine. I'll have to find another. But is it possible that we might be able to have some type of coordination to have that ARB meeting on this, knowing we're going to submit those elevations with the upcoming package in between those meetings? I think that was our hope, at least.
Threading the needle. You're asking us to recommend you to the ARB at this point. We haven't seen but a single 3D drawing.
I guess technically I'm asking for a recommendation, more just the ARB, I mean, if it can happen before the formal review by your board. The board, it is just a makeup of your board, but you all will get comments and feedback again, it was just a point of clarification.
Well, look, this is one way to look at it. It really depends on, the board. If you feel you're ready with significant enough material to review by the ARB, we can certainly consider it.
Yeah, I think by the time we submit for the February meeting, that'll be together.
So you're talking maybe the 10th of February?
The 3rd or the 10th, either one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like a heads up because my availability during the day, working hours is limited now.
Yeah, those are the 2 Fridays. The 3rd is the first one after the submission, or the 10th are the 2 Fridays in February.
So, I'm sorry, who else is on our ARB?
I'm an alternate, but I'm out of town on the 10th, sorry.
Yeah, Len is on it.
Len. So we'll work the scheduling.
Understood.
Yeah. There may be enough conflicts,
Maybe
but
out of town on the 10th. Yeah.
What was that?
I think I'm out of town on the 10th.
Shoot for the 3rd.
Shoot for the 3rd.
So I'm sure we can discuss acting on a recommendation to get you in front of the ARB. We'll work the scheduling outside of this then. So to that end, I'll accept a motion to recommend the applicant to ARB for architectural review.
After we receive the elevations.
Well, yeah, this would be contingent upon that.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, this will be a generic recommendation to the ARB, but everything has to be in place for you guys to actually meet. Schedules, material, right?
Appreciate it.
Yeah. So I'll accept the motion.
Motion.
Motion by Kevin.
Second.
Second by Karen. All in favor? Aye. And then let's just talk about SECRA real quick. This does fall under SECRA.
That is correct. This is an unlisted action. There's no seeker action on the table right now. There's still a lot of open items.
Yeah. There's still work to do there. I was more working toward this idea of our tradition of
a seeker
SECRA
public hearing.
It's
It's up to you guys. If you think that there are environmental issues you'd like some public feedback on, you could do the hearing. If
I kind of had it up to my ears with public hearings.
It is not mandated that you have a seeker public hearing. Again, there will be an opportunity for public comments when you do your regular subdivision hearing.
Yeah. So just based on your first point relative to whether at this point we foresee things rising to the level of significant adverse, and to that degree, we would want to have public aware of and comment on. I personally don't feel like we're at that threshold or we'll ever get there. So I'm advocating for not holding a secret public hearing. Just wanted to hear around the board whether you would agree.
I would not agree. I think that neighborhood has a lot of development happening, and I think it warrants their
fair? You're a glutton for punishment.
I agree. There was a lot of response to the Beacon Views project, and I think people would like a chance to voice their
Yeah, fair,
concerns.
fair, okay.
And if I may, there's no the regulations encourage that the seeker public hearings be combined with the other hearings. We will have a subdivision and site plan hearing. So given the nature here, there might be an opportunity to consider those together. This is a lot merger, not a subdivision. We're not creating any new lots. So Taylor's interpretation of that code has been rejected many times by the city's attorney. But notwithstanding.
Keep trying it.
Someday.
Gonna
So-
catch him snoozing one day.
And the lot merger is what puts it in the subdivision category, which makes it an unlisted action.
Yep. Okay, well, we're still early to actually schedule a secret public hearing, so I just thought I'd do that theoretical exercise and see what you guys all thought about a public hearing. I think we're in agreement that we'll hold one when the time comes.
Doesn't seem like it doesn't seem that impactful.
Yeah, well,
But that's why we have the hearing. We just-
Yeah, and you're going to have all those materials, I mean, the full baked seeker-ready application you'll have well before February's meeting. Those materials are there, but then.
Well, we at least have good practice at public hearings, so.
We do.
Great.
Great.
Thank
you
you
very much for your help. Thank you. Good evening.
And with that,
T-Storm's out.
I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
by Jill.
Second.
Second by Karen. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We almost made 10 o'clock.
Everyone, it was a pleasure. Thank you for having me.